Good.
All right, I'd like to call this meeting of the West Allis Milwaukee School Board to order. Ms. Lee, would you please lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Jeanette, would you please call the roll?
Yes.
Mr. Becker.
Here.
Mr. Keller.
Here.
Mrs. Carr.
Here.
Mr. Sikich.
Present.
Mr. Burns.
Present.
Mrs. Kaiser.
Here.
Ms. Deal.
Here.
Mrs. Lee.
Here.
President Lee.
Here. Proper notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the open meeting laws of the state of Wisconsin. Do we have any modifications to the agenda this evening?
No changes.
All right, well, then we'll move right into the superintendent's report.
Great. Thank you. We'll start with 6.1. It's a brief legislative update. So for Madison, Governor Tony Evers, on Friday, December 9th, announced the dates for his 2023 State of the State address and the 23-25 biennial budget message. So the State of the State will be on January 24th, 2023 at 7 p.m. and the biennial budget message on February 15th, 2023 at 7 p.m. And 6.2 is the Board of Education recognitions. First at Horace Mann, Mr. Marks's PE classes at Horace Mann have been working with skaters from US Speed Skating and the Pettit National Ice Center this year. The skaters came to Horace Mann once a week for 4 weeks to teach all of the 3rd through 5th graders how to inline skate. Then the Pettit National Ice Center invited the same students to come and learn how to ice skate. The students went to the Pettit National Ice Center once a week for 4 weeks for 90 minutes and used their inline skating skills to help them learn how to ice skate. The program was sponsored by the Pettit National Ice Center, and they covered all of the costs. So big thank you to Brian Marks, Horace Mann PE teacher, Carolyn Spiewak, Pettit National Ice Center, and the Pettit National Ice Center skating instructors. From Pershing, shout out to Amanda Wood, Melanie Foland, Nicole Ellman, and Alyssa Johnson for being volunteer coaches for Girls on the Run this season. From Hale, Colleen Stepp, Spanish teacher at Nathan High School, was recognized by the American Association of Teachers of Spanish and Portuguese, the Wisconsin chapter, as the Distinguished Educator for 2022. That was on Saturday, November 5th at Appleton, Wisconsin, at the annual Wisconsin Association for Language Teachers Conference. And I also just want to do a additional recognition, thanking everybody that participated in, worked on, organized, set up the Target shopping experience. It is remarkable, the amount of work that Shelley and the team put in to get it so well organized, and it just works. And to see the faces of kids and parents, and love seeing the basketball players helping with shopping with the families. And yeah, it really is, I think, a remarkable and unique thing that we do. And I also a note of thanks to the Zeman Family Foundation. So they provide the resources that allow us to do that. And for students that didn't show up, the schools then cover that. And then I was at Longfellows today, where then each school also had some additional resources to go buy extra coats, hats, mittens, things that kids need, as we get into the colder months. So a really remarkable event again. Then 6.3, a couple updates and information items. So there was one public comment at the regular school board meeting on November 28th. So Mr. Broadwell again commented on a math resource that we use that includes more of a social justice lens. And we've responded to similar comments in the past, so there's really nothing new to add there. But I did want to respond to his criticism of Dotkey Project-Based Learning High School. And in part, he was correct that in 2021, Dotkey was the 5th lowest performing high school in the state, based on the state school report cards, and they had a score of 17. It was also the very first time Dotkey ever had an actual report card, because they were an alternative school. So, but I think what's important here is that the 21-22 school year, the score was 43.7. So to go from 17 to 43.7, we really should be dancing in the aisles for that kind of improvement. And it's a school that is 74% economically disadvantaged. So it's a high poverty school. It's beating the odds. And one, well, I can't imagine they'll have that kind of swing again, but they'll certainly start to meet expectations soon. And I think that it is worth, even though we know there's a lot more work to do, there always is. But I don't want to diminish the fact through public comments that they're doing really good work at Dotkey. So I just wanted to recognize that. A little bit of school consolidation update. So Amanda and Steve Eichmann and I met with Longfellow Elementary students today. There were 4 teams that they had ideas of what we should do with the school when it's closed. And it was a lot of fun. They were very nervous, and very well prepared. There were 2 of them had ideas for a community center. One focused more on activities for kids. The other one focused more on community support, so mental health supports of food pantry, some of those kind of things. A group of young men wanted to change it to a football training facility. And at first they wanted to have something indoors and then discovered like, oh, that's really expensive. So now they just want an outdoor field. And I asked them to go measure to make sure it could fit. And then another group of students, their idea was to put an art center in the space so that the classrooms could be used by artists as their studios and then have a gallery and museum space. So it was fun to spend the time. We're going to take those ideas and use them next week when we do the community engagement process at Longfellow. So that'll be on December 20th. So we'll share some of those and some of the other big ideas that are percolating, like housing or commercial redevelopment. And then let whoever attends take the ideas and start to kind of do some imagining, brainstorming with floor plans of how things might fit together. And from that, we'll surface kind of some ideas that we'll bring back here. Then Deidre and Chris Miller and I met with Walker staff early this morning. And it was really there, we're doing the next round of meetings to check in on where things are at with the school consolidation planning. Walker also has the leadership transition. So that's why Chris Miller is a part of it now. So those are really helpful meetings to share updates, answer questions, respond to rumors. One really interesting one came up that somebody said, one of the teachers said, I heard we're going to have to use the gym as a classroom next year. So where's gym going to be? Complete, like just out of nowhere rumor. So it is helpful that we step in the space. We're meeting with Madison staff on Wednesday of this week, and then we'll continue to cycle through the various schools. And there's no other updates at this point. So that concludes the superintendent's report.
All right, thank you very much. So we'll move on to public comments. If there's anyone listening in Zoom or sitting in the room here who would like to participate in public comments, there's an online form. There's a link in the chat for Zoom if anyone arrived late. Currently, we have no one signed up for public comments. I'll just leave 30 seconds for someone who maybe didn't realize that was the process to be able to fill that form out. All right, seeing no additional signups, no one else in the room scrambling to go over to the iPad, I will close public comments at this time. We'll move on to item 8, our board reports. Starting with 8.1, review the board calendars. Today is Monday, December 12th, 6 p.m. We have the Board of Education meeting. And then we also have a college and career readiness workshop meeting, panorama results and student attendance, as well as district office relocation. And on Monday, December 19th at 6 p.m. a regular Board of Education meeting, immediately followed by a financial stability and efficiency workshop meeting going over other post-employment benefits review. Then on Monday, January 9th at 6 p.m. we have a regular Board of Education meeting and then a financial stability and efficiency workshop meeting, enrollment projections and open enrollment seats for 23-24 school year. And then on Monday, January 16th at 6 p.m. we have a board workshop meeting with Melissa Matarazzo from Huron Consulting Group, looking at our strategic plan and scorecard update. And then Monday, January 23rd at 6 p.m. we have the Board of Education meeting, immediately followed by a closed session. So moving on to 8.2, a board committee report, starting with 8.2.1, college and career readiness. Ms. Deal.
Thank you. So our committee met this evening, and so there's 2 things that we talked about. So we got an update on our Deeper Virtual Learning Academy. So we just talked about, so they're currently, the enrollment at DVLA is 97. 66% of that are resident students. So that means 34% are actually families who choose to open enroll with us. Their school improvement plan, they're working on developing their digital portfolios. They also have a goal of 50% of the students will make growth in reading, math, and then they're working on increasing the ACT scores. They also are working on they want to do 1 public demonstration of learning per semester. They recently passed their first audit through DPI. And then just a highlight, several of the teachers were actually recently chosen to present some of their material, or their, what they do in their classrooms at upcoming conferences. And I don't know the names of them, but they'll be presenting. And then for our recent professional development that the teachers had, there were 6 cohorts that they could choose from. So they will actually then be working with those same educators at the next 2 professional development days. They did put out a survey after PD, just kind of get, some feedback from from staff. The positive feedback that they received was that the educators felt they had enough time to explore the resources. There was good collaboration with other staff. And then they also our teachers provided some good suggestions for future professional developments. So,
All right, thank you very
That's it.
much. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Deal, her committee regarding her report? Or any topics you would like to be considered in a future agenda? All right, seeing none, thank you so much, Ms. Deal. Let's move on to 8.2.2, or financial stability and efficiency. Ms. Kaiser.
All right, so our committee met on December 8th. Let me keep it basically short because we are having a workshop tonight regarding the 9333 district office proposal. What the committee heard, we all approved, and we're happy to bring it to the board tonight. We also have an amazing update on OPEB that there'll be a workshop December 19th that I'm very excited for everyone to hear about. And I'm just going to keep it simple because we have a couple of in-depth workshops coming up on both those issues.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. Any questions regarding that? We do have workshops tonight and next week, Monday. If you do bring those questions to the workshop, and hopefully they'll get answered.
There's a lot of slides.
All right, any future agenda items for Ms. Kaiser's committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. I'll move on to 8.3 board member reports of community events. Any community events where members attended like to report back on?
I have a bunch.
Ms. Deal.
Yes. I've been busy. And I do want to say thank you to all the schools and the teachers that let me know about these. So, so I just want to say, so Franklin, I was able to attend their school showcase, excuse me, on November 30th. It was really great. I got to see, it was fun. I got to take a picture with their Roadrunner mascot, and which was the highlight, one of the highlights of my life, but it was great. I got to see the kids with their, they did murals. One class did, another one did their flavors for, the custard place. Yeah,
Yep.
the 4K kids did this really cool, like I think it was like gratitude, but it was a lot of fun. And then Longfellow, I was able to attend their Trim a Tree event. That was a lot of fun. That was last week. It was really cool just to see all the families there. It was chilly, but it was a fun night. Also a huge shout out to our music department. I was able to attend the Madison Winter Concert and Lane's Band Concert, both just phenomenal. And then kind of piggybacking on what Dr. Lexman said, the Target shopping experience I was able to go do on Saturday. And it was really fun. We were able to serve like 700 students in our districts, and it was just a really great event. So we're doing a lot of really good stuff.
Yes, definitely. Thank you very much. Anyone else? Ms. Kaiser?
I was able to attend Mitchell's tree lighting, which was really nice. Lots of good hot cocoa. Also, it was really nice to walk in the parade. I haven't done a parade since I was marching band, so it's been a while. And it was very nice, and we ran out of candy fast and granola bars even faster.
Yes, we did. Anybody else? Joe.
A couple. I was at a couple of the same events that Mrs. Steele was at. First was the Lane Band Concert. That was nice to see. Some of the innovations that Mr. Daniels, the director, came up with, particularly for the 7th graders. But they only had 9 kids. I think they were missing 1. They have 10 regularly. But he had them write their own song. So they wrote it, composed it, and he put in a little bit of massaged it a little bit, but I thought that was a really interesting way to kind of embrace the project-based learning. I thought that was a really cool one. Also got to go to the Target shop event, and that was really nice. Seeing all the kids who were involved was really fantastic. I think that's what I like the best. Seeing the strings perform, they were really great. That was a really nice touch, I thought, too. So it was really happy to have been able to been at that one, and had a couple conversations with families I wouldn't have met otherwise.
Awesome. Very good. Thank you for that. Anyone else have any events they want to report on? So I also attended a number of the things some people have reported on. I don't want to go over those again. Others state that, yes, they were fantastic events. It was great to see. I love seeing all the volunteers at the Target shopping event with our students and our staff, of course, that are, making that event happen. And kudos to Shelley and her staff for putting it together. It is a lot of things to try and get all together and lined up so that it goes smoothly. And despite a power outage, it did go smoothly.
Yeah. Well, partial.
So yes, everyone remained calm. There was no looting. It was great. So kudos for that. I also was able to attend the Hoover kind of combination of a band and choir concert that they had there for their winter concert. So very well done. All the students did a great job. And it is, Declan's been said this before, my daughter's now in 4th grade and seeing how they go from 4K and listening to those individuals playing and singing and then moving up as they get older and get more skill as they go over time is very impressive to see, especially seeing like shining strings in those individuals when they're participating in a lot of events in the district. So, but yeah, lots of great things, especially this time of year. Always pulled in multiple directions trying to get everything. So I give Dr. Luxman credit for being able to attend all the things he does. Okay. Anything else otherwise?
What was the flavor for Big Deal? What did they come up with?
They had 3, didn't they?
I think more than one.
Yeah.
I thought they were just gonna pick one that's in the final.
Flavors. So it was Thursday night was, I think, the second runner up. Friday was the first runner up, and then the winner was Saturday.
Hmm.
That's great. Okay, let's move on to our consent agenda for the evening. We have 9.1 approval of minutes from regular Board of Education. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. That's right. My apologies. I skipped myself. 8.4 other updates and information items, which is me. I actually do have what I think is an exciting update. So I was able to get some information back from Rain Associates on our superintendent search. And so currently, we're a little less than a month after opening. So the 15th would be 1 month of having the application open. We currently have 11 completed applications.
Oh, wow.
They're from a wide number of states: California, Illinois, Mississippi, Maryland, Texas, Michigan, New York, as well as Wisconsin.
Wow.
And there's 16 additional pending applications at this point. So that are in some form or other of being completed, but so we don't know if all those would in fact be completed or not, but those are some additional states of Montana and Florida. So, our breadth of search is at least getting interest from other parts of the country, which is really the point of what we want to do, a truly national search. And so again, that is open for another little over a month. That'll close sometime next year. So I hope probably after the new year, I'll see, where we're at as far as those applications go, if we have more completed ones, and I'll provide an update at that point. All right, thank you, Ms. Steele. So then I'll move on to our consent agenda, starting with 9.1, approval of minutes from regular Board of Education meeting from our November 28th meeting. 9.2, employment summary, and 9.3, the supplementary contracts. Does anybody need anything separated out?
I need 9.3 separated out, please.
9.3, okay, anybody else? See none, I look for a motion.
Second.
This is 9.1 to 9.2. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes. And then look for a motion on 9.3.
Move to approve 9.3.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Still be abstaining.
I'll be abstaining. Yes.
Okay. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, and 1 abstention. All right, that passes. Thank you very much. Let's move on to our number 10 action items for this evening, starting with 10.1, Recreation and Community Services Center Edition. Ms. Strasser.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
We are here tonight, and this has been shared and discussed previously in committee. But from sort of day one of our original rec center, we had plans for additional space. We held off at time, 1, budget reasons, but then 2, also wanted to, just get into the space and start using it and find out what additional space we really need. We are pleasantly surprised. We already are pretty much at capacity and running out of space. We find that we're having to some of our programs aren't really in space that's appropriate for them based on size. Some programs are kind of maxing out. One's our adult day program, we have additional interest. We just really don't have space, and kind of based on some of the needs they just need and the activities they do, more space. Our staff is growing. We recently hired a marketing and design specialist, and a morning support and additional support for our non-school day camps to have some consistency. That's an area we found when staffing changed from camp to camp, and or because on camp days and on school days, we're pulling kids from 11 different schools. When you don't have staff that kind of consistently knows the kids, that becomes a challenge. So now we have a staff member that leads those. But those two staff members are sort of just working in flux in our workspace. So we're here tonight, and we did an RFP, went through the official process, got 3 proposals. Myself and Steve Eichmann independently reviewed those and then got together, prepared our notes and scores. And we're coming tonight to the board to ask approval to move forward with the addition. And then in an amount not to exceed 3.5 million, which is fully funded from our fund balance. And then we'd like to move forward working with CG Schmidt. Is who kind of came out on top, and then included in your packet was the list of vendors that submitted proposals.
Thank you. Questions from the board? I have some questions.
Absolutely.
Always like to give everyone else a chance first. So first of all, just a statement. So the fund balance that you're referring to is Fund 80,
Correct.
which is separate from the general fund, Fund 10, that we are basically operating the school district out of. Just this is for the public. I know you guys. This is, they understand. This is not 3.5 million coming out of just all the money. It's coming specifically out of the funds which are levied specifically for recreation and community service. So that's number one. Number two, can you give any sort of ideas like what is going? You kind of said maybe some offices, maybe some classroom space. Where do you foresee this space to be used for? And then how does like juxtapose this against some of the things that we're looking at doing at Lane, which we had approved earlier this year, and see how that space is going to be used, at the same time, basically, eventually.
Yeah, so some of the things we're thinking about right now are adult fitness.
Mhm.
We have our dance fitness studio is really nice, but it only can fit a certain amount of people.
Mhm.
So we do need additional space for our fitness classes, and we know not that our schools aren't good spaces to use, but there's no air conditioning. Sometimes some of the flooring surfaces aren't really appropriate for or safe for some of the classes that we have. So it's really the space we're looking for. We really want it to be more flexible space in terms of, you can have like we do now. You can have, like we have our adult day program during the day, and at night it turns into space for babysitting classes or space for karate or different. So it's just really more flexible space. We don't have any additional meeting rooms. We had one very small meeting space, but pretty exciting. It's hot off the press. We turned that space into a maker space that just opened up today, and within an hour or two of announcing that, we already had someone in there using it. So and I know we had talked about that potentially at Lane, but we wanted to do this on kind of a smaller scale, try it out and see how that goes. So there the new space would also allow for meetings simultaneously to happen. Oftentimes, like we have Doro, that's our big meeting room. But if there's something going on in there, like we've turned people away because we just don't have any other kind of multi-purpose type space to use, because our adult day program is in one of our other activity rooms, Monday through Wednesday, and then also Fridays. Currently, they bowl on Thursdays, but they're even kind of looking at changing that up, their schedule for next year. So we just don't have additional space, and some of our programs are really growing during the day. The other thing is looking at bringing more potentially some of our early childhood programs that are currently at Irving Fieldhouse to the rec center. That way, if a parent has a child who's in preschool, they could do another program with another child in the same space, not having to try, get to multiple space or places at one time.
Okay. The 3.5 million figure, is that furnished, with everything that's required for it?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, that'll be in all. And that, having gone through this process once before, now we kind of know how that that looks, you sort of start with some pie in the sky kind of things, and then in this case it would be CG Schmidt, helps you build that down, and that, that will include things like additional cameras. Is there any type of technology we'll need in there? Obviously, we're gonna have to reconnect, and some HVAC and all those things will all be included. That'll be a max price.
Okay. What's the timeline? Is there any timeline if this is approved tonight, when it would start, when it would supposedly be done?
That's kind of the process you go through with them. Like, they will start, then once you hire who you're working with, they help you with that, create that timeline. And we just know now in construction, starting anything is out. This will be a little bit different too. We're gonna have to give considerations to the building is gonna be fully functioning during construction. There won't be, like before, that could all happen and you weren't interrupting anybody. So some of those factors will play in there, but that's one of the nice things they really help you to create that timeline.
Okay.
And we're really not like we're not gonna have a hard deadline that we have to meet or reach. So, we have some flexibility there.
Okay. I guess my last question is there any plans for like any community meetings just to let people in the neighborhood know what's going on, since there will be construction and stuff like that?
Yeah, we will do that, similar to we did the first time, and we have a nice list. Plus now we're part of a local neighborhood association that we can get information out. So we'll do, email lists to those that have been previously involved with both the rec center project and the playground project. Do some door hangers, then also reach out through the neighborhood association.
Thank you. I think that's all the questions I had. Anybody else have any questions? Mr. Burns?
Excuse me, sorry. This is a pre-planned space, right? That's what it says in the proposal, like this had been planned before, but it is not, didn't come to fruition because of prior budgets, right?
Right, well, we knew when we originally started on the current rec center that eventually, we wanted to leave the opportunity open, right? Not knowing what our needs might be. So the architects that we had at the time already had, like, it's already written into the plans where the hallway would be, where the space that we know, and how that all connects and flows together.
So then possible long-term planning was already established with the cost of the 3.5 million. And then expansion where it looks like it'd be a lot of offices, but then also some other pieces with it. How long would it be expected to get a return on investment kind of thing when we're bringing in this much to do this? Like, how fast will you be able to then fill that space up once you have it and start utilizing it so that you're covering the costs?
Kind of given already the needs we see, I will immediately start programming it, and the office space is minimal. We're looking at 2. The other need that I didn't mention earlier is storage. I know we have a lot of built-in cabinets, but big storage, tables, chairs, those take up a lot of space. And when those spaces are purpose, we're putting nice chairs in, sometimes meeting chairs, square tables, training tables, round table, all like there will be that too. So I mean, that there's really no revenue generated from that, but yet to support all the other things, we're going to need that. And the return on recovering that cost would be probably really long-term, kind of based on the prices that we charge. Sure. Yeah, but I mean, in terms of it would be utilized day one that we get the A-OK from, all the permits and everything, we'll be using it.
Oh, thank you. Any other questions? All right, I look for a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any last minute questions or discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? All right, that passes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Keep you posted.
We'll move on to 10.2. Co-op high school athletic teams board policies, a second reading. Ms. Strasser.
And this is exactly that second reading. There were no changes or modifications or edits from the first reading, so it kind of stands as is for this second reading.
All right, any questions or comments from the board?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any last minute discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? All right, that passes.
Yep.
Thank you very much. We're move on to 10.3, the 23-24 budget calendar. Mr. Norris.
Good evening, everyone. So we're here tonight to talk through the 23-24 budget calendar. And so I kind of passed out what's posted already in the minutes. Just to kind of talk through a little easier to see. So the 23-24 budget calendar development was annually a workshop the board had done every year. And last year the board had decided, given the kind of the repetitiveness of it, to decide to make this more of an annual basis. So just wanted to talk through it at a high level with you as a refresher. We've had a number of budget related discussions from the prelim budget last spring up until the final budget approval about a month and a half ago. So really, the budget calendar development, as crazy as it seems, for next year starts kind of tonight. And so we're still, 7 months away from it being the fiscal year of next year, but it starts tonight with the calendar approval, which we'll proceed with into the winter, into the spring, into the summer, into next fall. So really, we start tonight, and then in February, in January, open enrollment comes to the board, and that really is based on the projection that our office works on for next school year. And then that leads into staffing discussions, which lead into, with school consolidation will be tied in there as well. And then in the spring, those discussions turn into a prelim budget from the state. And given that there's a biennial budget that's coming up from the state, that will start dictating kind of revenue limits and our tax levy. So there are really no large changes to the budget calendar from previous years to this year. And so with that, I will pause and take questions.
Any questions on this annual piece? So we have to approve, but essentially the dates change as we move forward in calendar, and that's pretty much it. If not, I'd look for a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to 10.4, the 23-24 school calendar. Dr. Luxman.
Yes, we'll get us started and Peter and I are here to answer any questions. So it's that time of year similar to the budget calendar where we start pivoting into the next school year. We're not halfway through the current year. But the school calendar is something parents always anticipate. And so this year, the way the school year starts, we have to be a little bit interesting in terms of planning. And so by state law, school districts aren't allowed to start school until September 1st or later, unless there's a waiver. So school districts get waivers if they have big construction projects or those kind of things going on. September 1st falls on a Friday, so not ideal in terms of starting a school year. We'd like to have usually 1 day isn't great, 2 days is better to at least get the wheels turning a little bit before a long weekend. And that Friday then probably is a low attendance day. So, but we did plan a calendar that started on the 1st, and then we planned one that starts on September 5th. And then we decided to ask for feedback from teachers. So there was a vote essentially, what's your first choice, second choice, or no choice, meaning it doesn't matter. And it's one of those moments where when you ask and you get results split pretty evenly, you're like, you really wanted to be obvious. But in the end, we think it makes sense to go with then September 5th. We have the long weekend before everybody comes back. The way all the professional development, professional learning opportunities kind of fall nicely within that space and have a little bit of time before students return on the 5th. It does push the teacher calendar, so the work day calendar, into another week at the end of the year. So then teachers have their final work or records keeping day on a Monday, which isn't great, but generally the practice we have is that if teachers have all of the work done, that wraps up the school year, meeting grades and classrooms that have to be packed up because if there's going to be painting or some of those kind of things, if all of those things are done and the principal signs off, and we always tell teachers, well, then go home, have a great summer. If you're done, you're done. The kids are done. And so when we asked the question, it came out to be just a little over, more than half that preferred starting on September 5th. So we are recommending that calendar. In addition, the calendar includes a new paid holiday, so we're reduced to one of the professional learning days in order to add a holiday for Martin Luther King Day, which is something the board has been interested in and talking about for quite some time. So it doesn't add costs that way. It's budget neutral. It just reduces by 1 day on the opportunities for professional learning, and that would be for 10-month employees on Martin Luther King Day. And then 12-month employees, so administrators at will employees would have flexible or floating holiday, as Mary Ann called it. And choose either the paid holiday on Martin Luther King Day or Juneteenth Day. And so both of those days are days without students, so it's a relatively low impact. And so that's on our recommended calendar for the 23-24 school year. Deidre, I don't know if you want to add anything more to that.
No, it kind of captured everything that was in there. We value our professional development days quite a bit, but we also know how important it is to honor that day in January for Martin Luther King Jr. So there's that balance of trying to find a way to do both. And again, added a paid holiday for teachers, which they certainly deserve. So we were happy to support that.
Questions?
Deidre, in the past, did we have 5 days of teacher work days?
We've had a balance in the number of years, and Suzette, you might know the specifics better even than I do, but there was a while in which we had 4 teacher professional development days during the year. We've had as many as 6, and then we've had 5. There's been kind of a couple of years where we've had 5, and some of them depended on, I think some years it depended on where the calendar sort of fell and how to keep a PD day on voting day and things like that. But it's been a variety of the number of days.
I have a question. I, 5 days of, before the kids get there, I remember back in the day when we had, new teachers coming back for all that and felt a little bit overwhelming. It feels like a lot to have 5 days of staff development. Can you just speak to that?
Oh, sorry. I thought you meant during the school year, Jane, because
No,
we've
like
now gone from 6
before-
days during the school year down to 5. Yep. So
Yeah.
before school started, it's been 5 for like I can't recall a
Always?
time when it wasn't the full 5 days.
It was 5.
What's that?
It really was 5?
That in my recollection, but again, I don't know. It certainly has been for the last number of years.
Okay.
It allows us a balance of doing a couple of things. There's always definitely one full day for teachers to have work in their classrooms, right? So it allows us some time to do that.
Mhm.
This last year, it allowed us a couple of days, or 2 years ago, it allowed us a couple of days for the teachers who didn't choose to come to, they had an option when we adopted a new resource of Scholastic. So it had the option for them to do their training during the summer and take paid, those days were paid. Or then it allowed us to have the 3 days full back to back of training for the teachers for whom it didn't work to come in the summer and they didn't choose to do that. So it allows us for some days like that. It allows a bit of a balance for there to be days where teachers are able to work with their whole staff and get to know all of the new staff. So we certainly haven't, it hasn't been something that we've considered reducing the number of days. It's been sort of standard practice for us.
That makes sense.
And we will have new resources again this next year with our math resource. So it does allow us some flexibility. Again, for some teachers, it works better for them to come, they want to get their hands on it all summer. So it works better for them. So we try to offer trainings in June and July. And for some teachers, that just doesn't work for them and their schedule. So then we can get the required training in during those days.
Jane, second? Good. Okay. Amy, you had a question?
Yeah, I know what I was gonna ask. Sorry, I lost for a minute. I'm just asking about the elementary days I see we have them like, October, December and March. I'm just curious as to why we only have one in the spring. Is that just, I don't know, do we always do that or is there a reason for it? Or do they not need as much support or? Well, I mean, shouldn't say it that way, but
Teachers always need support,
Yes.
Amy, all year around. But it's a balance of also when we have additional other days off.
Oh, okay.
Right. And so
Okay.
we tried to keep
Okay.
them, you try to keep the same number of days in each quarter. the same number, you have to keep the same number of days in each semester. Then you want to work around, where we have the longer break. So because in winter, we have those additional days off in January, we have the double PD day in February. That's really where it comes down to, there only being one in the spring is the number of other days off that we have.
Stewart's?
My question is also about those planning days, but not why there's so many or not. But the question that I have, and this kind of came up in one of our other committee meetings, is putting them on Wednesdays. There's been a huge component of people unhappy with that, specifically parents. With having a Wednesday off in the middle of the week with young kids, it's hard to get things done and plan and do things appropriately. So we also were then talking, because traditionally Mondays or Fridays are hard days to get subs. It would seem that it'd be better to put those days on a Friday or a Monday, so that we can basically deal with the sub shortage, as well as allow our teachers to do things. Additionally, just on thinking about that, while I appreciate that they're out there and they're moving around, we do a balance of when these things are versus our other off days. And so that parents don't necessarily have to be doing this off day and that off day and this other off day. Why are these not put, like, say, the October one with the 26th, so that parents have a full section of time to be off, so they're only planning one time where they're having to disrupt their schedule? Or similar with the December, put it on the 22nd, it leads into vacation. There's only one time that they have to do it rather than two. And I think, while I appreciate the Wednesdays, actually, I don't, I hate them. I hate them. As a parent, I hate them too. So I don't like them there. And I don't understand why we haven't moved those to make them an easier part of the calendar, so that they're built into other lost time off, because, or they're used to deal with substitute shortages. Right now, they're just kind of in the way and inconvenient.
Yeah, the original idea on choosing a Wednesday when we started them was that it then, especially if you tie it to a break, suddenly then people are taking that day right before the December 22nd, and then they're taking the day before that, and they're taking, right? So attendance tends to be higher on the days on either side of it when it was midweek, is kind of what the thinking was behind them. I mean, we don't have any reason to not consider moving them to a Monday or a Friday for a variety of reasons. We do tend to have a lot of Mondays for the PD days. And so we haven't really talked about that very much internally outside of when we first started it. That was the reasoning, Brendan. Yeah.
Okay.
But I respect that it's difficult for families to plan around that.
Yeah, I think it would be something to consider, not having them there and either putting them with a weekend, so a family has 3 days, or put it with the other days that are off, so that the families, because they won't be there, can then
Yep.
plan and go longer. And then the teachers can do the work that they need to do and head off into their vacation as well.
It's the only thing I want to know is these are elementary only.
I understand.
So,
Right.
so if you have families that have both elementary and secondary kids, we might see a reduction in our attendance on those days, because then the whole family's going instead of just elementary. So I think that's something that we have to take into account. We don't want to lose attendance in our secondary schools for families who are taking the advantage of the fact that their elementary kids are not in school.
Sure, but I think that's a chicken or the egg. If the parents are gonna leave, they're gonna leave anyways, whether they have both or one or the other, they're going to go.
Or secondary kids are staying home to babysit.
Yeah.
I'm paying $30 for a wonderful day camp, but it would have been great to have a free sitter home that day as well. So,
And
I mean, I agree with Brendan.
I would agree with Brendan also. I actually forgot about the one on December 7th, and it's hard. You got to figure it out. So I think that's putting, I agree with Brendan. I think especially even though it is just elementary, that's the middle of the week is incredibly hard for parents to get off work. Even like Kristen said, yeah, there are camps available and stuff, but again, do you have even the money to pay for a camp? Do you have the money to pay for a sitter? So I think it is something worthwhile for us to look at reconsidering.
Or
moving
give a
it.
board member who can take my son very fast one day, I paid her in coffee. It's all good.
I'll just say, I agree too, especially from the sub perspective, if Mondays and Fridays, and we know this, they're more difficult to get subs. Then we should be utilizing that information, in a way that kind of helps offset some of these things too. So, if we have that day on a Monday or a Friday, less need for subs those days, obviously. So I think that would be an important factor as well.
And then, right, what do you think of it? We were just to move those all to the Monday of the week where they currently are scheduled.
Yeah, the only other question is, do we balance them and put them on a Friday of that week instead? Just because the PD days are usually the Mondays, and then at least it provides some balance to that. If you have a family we have lots of families who work in the healthcare field, and if you're you don't want the day to always be on
Yeah.
a Monday.
missing.
Right, you're not always missing the same day, and then for our staff who aren't full-time.
And we've got a lot of parents whose schedules have changed a little too especially after COVID and stuff, where at least people I talk to where they're working different schedules, where more have like a 4-day work week.
Yeah.
Or they have a flex schedule where they can work from home 1 day a week, and it's usually later in the week.
Yeah.
That it might be a little bit easier for them to get someone to watch their kid on a Friday versus a Monday. So you might just have a little more flexibility between the 2 days to push them to the end of the week versus the beginning of the week.
At least then there's a balance.
Yeah, both,
Yeah.
both work. I was just going back and forth.
Yeah.
To see where they land in terms of the quarters, and either the Monday or the Friday doesn't disrupt the number of days in the quarters.
Mm-hmm.
So, right. Either way. It would really be a motion to approve it with whatever you want to recommend in terms of the change of the elementary planning days to, I think what I'm hearing is the Fridays of the current week.
So, yeah,
I mean,
October
I'd
6th.
actually advocate to put it with other days already off. So October on the 26th, December on the 22nd, and March on the 21st.
So I wouldn't recommend that. It's going to create a perception issue that elementary teachers have more holiday time than secondary teachers. Even though it's a work day, it creates a perception problem for them.
And I think if this change is made, that we definitely want to pay attention to attendance.
Mm-hmm.
And see how
Yeah.
that changes for,
Right.
for students and for staff that are supposed to be at those days, to make sure that we don't all of a sudden have this influx of people who are calling in or something. Because obviously the point of having the day is so that they have the time to do the things they need to do
Mhm.
without having students there. But if they're not attending it, you kind of lose the purpose of the day, which we added at their request.
Yep.
So we want to try and make sure that we're not, by having it about a weekend, we're not losing that benefit.
Yep.
For the staff.
Yeah, that's certainly something we can report back on after the first one next year compared to the ones that were on a Wednesday this year. And if
Mhm.
there's some reason if it's that drastic that we want to propose a change, we can always come back and do that as well.
Kristen, yes.
May I make a motion then?
Well, is there any other discussion or questions that people want to have regarding the calendar?
I'm just not, I don't know that I'm feeling 100% comfortable with the change. I feel like I don't know how much thought we've just put into this. And to change the whole calendar and based on just this one discussion, I'm not sure I'm comfortable with it.
With just the moving the elementary planning days, Jane?
Right. I'm not sure. Now we haven't talked to teachers about it. We haven't, we're making a major change in the calendar tonight.
We're moving it 2 days in the same week.
The teachers still have to be there.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's
It
only-
doesn't change
it's
their
only really
schedule.
impacts-
It's basically just impacting the parents.
Yeah.
All right. So from your
So-
point of view, Deidre, as far as like the presenter, you're feeling that, I'm thinking about staff development with teachers. Will they,
Yeah, so remember, these are planning days, so we don't schedule any meetings on the elementary planning days. We don't,
Okay.
those are truly their days to plan. And that came to us again out of We have multiple opportunities for employees to give feedback, and one of them is usually Marty and I go around to schools. This year, we're concentrating a lot of effort into the school consolidation schools, so we haven't gone to each school yet, but we do, and then we ask some questions and we ask for feedback. And what kept coming back every time was especially at elementary, because they do see there's groups of students for longer periods of time, and anytime there's an issue with a sub, then of course the specials get pulled and all of those kinds of things that are just kind of the natural part of the work, sadly and unfortunately, still working on it. But that is the reality of what happens, that they really did want more planning time. And especially as they dive into our project-based work and our deeper learning work, they want to be able to work with the art teacher for an hour to plan a project or do things like
Okay.
that. So they're truly planning days.
Okay.
Principals are not allowed to schedule meetings on those days. Principals can host sessions that are voluntary. So staff will say, hey, on the planning day, can somebody show me a bit more about how to read my Scholastic data? Or can somebody, right? And so then certainly we're happy to use that time for that if a staff member is asking, but we hold nothing that is required on those days. They really are dedicated to collaborative planning, especially where teachers have those longer chunks of time to work together. Because that little, the time in the morning, which we greatly appreciate and we actually use quite well, there's just not enough of it, that goes really fast. That what turns into about 26 minutes by the time you get there, and then people leave and go to their duties and things like that. So yeah, so it doesn't disrupt the intention of the day. It
Okay.
doesn't disrupt the support that we are offering to staff, right? If suddenly that becomes a day when every elementary teacher is taking their personal days or calling in sick, then that's the question, because they asked for it, like Noah was saying, so that they had additional time to plan together. And if that's not going to meet that need, then we should decide if there's a different way to meet that need. But I think our elementary teachers value those days quite a bit. They use them. There is a lot of super amazing discussion and things going on during those days right now. So I would imagine,
Lots of head nodding. Lots of head nodding.
right now, right? I don't think they're gonna suddenly want to not come on those days, because they really do use them really, really well. And it's just such a nice way to honor the work that they're trying to do. The deeper you get into this work, the more planning it requires,
Mhm.
right? And so we want people to feel like they have the time to do that. So from a programmatic lens, I am not worried about where we put the day. From an attendance lens, and we'll talk about that when we get into workshop, I am always worried about where we put days off, because then we always have people taking the day before or the day after, and it impacts us in these huge ways. That's always a concern, but we don't have any data that says it's going to be any better or any worse if we move it to a Friday yet, because we haven't tried that.
As a former specialist, do you ever look into the fact that, well, on certain days, elementary kids are losing art, music, or FIAD or whatever, maybe all three of them? Or do you just say, well, that's just the way life is?
Yeah, it depends. Building by building, it's a little bit different. It depends on whether or not then the teacher is supporting those activities, because there's some that are just not required as part of our DPI minutes especially for physical education. And so you are supposed to keep track of some of those things, and we do the best we can to do some of that. Sometimes if they've been collaboratively planning together on a project, at least the instruction from those courses can kind of continue, but that's sort of a rarity. We just do the best we can to make sure that we're keeping up with as much of the coursework as the kids can take on or can do, as if they had any other substitute. If the teacher's being paid to substitute for that time, they'll frequently do the art materials just as if there was a sub, or sometimes the music materials. And then sometimes our elementary teachers just keep their own students back from specials that day, and they do the best they can, but that is a bit of a challenge, trying to make sure that we've actually covered all of those things in the course of that.
Superintendent, your hand raised.
Yeah, just as a thought, if with the attendance being a concern, just if we do put the motion in and approve it, could we make sure that we are then just, there's someone go with a thumb that's data mining that, just so that because if it turns out to be a terrible choice, then we can move it back.
Yes. Yeah, we actually just made a data review calendar today, because we're looking at some other data pieces on a much more regular basis. So I'm just going to add it to that, Brendan, so that we remember at the first one next year to grab that data.
Okay.
And it's pretty easy. We have people who do that, obviously. So it's pretty easy to look at this planning day versus this planning day to see if there's any trends in it.
Other questions? All right, so what we're discussing is approving the calendar with the change of moving the elementary planning days from October 4th to October 6th, December 6th to December 8th, and March 6th to March 8th.
Yes.
With the caveat that we'll be looking at attendance carefully from a student perspective. I'm just sure that we're not taking a problem and making it worse. Is that understood? All right, so then the motion would have to include those changes.
All right, motion to approve the school calendar with the discussed changes to elementary planning days.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I'm abstaining.
Mr. Sikich is abstaining. That passes. All right. That is the end of our action items for this evening. We move into workshops next. Do we need to take a break before we move into the workshops?
We have 5 minutes.
All right. We'll take a 5-minute break and we'll be in recess and return in just about. Evening, 11.1, college and career readiness, panorama results in student attendance. Ms. Raymer?
Good evening again, everyone. So we're excited to share a little bit more about what we're doing with Panorama. Nick Burr is with me tonight. He is a counselor at Frank Lloyd Wright and our lead school counselor. And then he also kind of heads up all of our work with Panorama. It is a super busy time of year for lots of people in our building. So I appreciate that Nick was able to take the time tonight just to share a bit around where the results are and kind of some of our plan. And then we added some information around attendance to this for the last couple of years. We have wanted people, we still want people to stay home if they are really ill and take care of themselves, but in some of the flexibility that we've also provided around attendance and things like that in the last couple of years, which was needed. We now have some bad habits around attendance that we're trying to break in our schools, and it has a pretty significant impact on us in a number of ways. Not just it's hard on kids when the learning gets disrupted, but I'll share a bit about where that had such a significant impact on our school report cards as well for some of our schools. And then talk a little bit around what our plans are going forward with some of the attendance pieces. And as our goal for our college and our life readiness through college and career preparation area is tied to seeing an increase. Oh,
Can you send this to us?
Yeah.
I can't see that.
Yeah.
Screens are really
You
like,
keep
well,
Joey's next to me.
That's
I
not.
can. Joe.
How dare you? We were learning about cornea lenses and retina in class, and the kids are like, "Can you see me?" I'm like, "No."
Put you all in there. Give me 1 second.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I will keep talking while I'm typing here for a second. But our goal in this area is around increasing all these skills in Panorama so that graduation rates increase, so that attendance rates increase, so that a lot of other things happen. So it was appropriate tonight to talk about those in conjunction with one another. And our goal for this year. Can I have everybody now? Our goal for this year, we have our 5-year goal. Right, Brian. Just 1 second. There we go. All right, now you guys have it. Our goal, our 1-year goal in this area is to increase our Panorama scores from an overall favorability rating of 58% to 65, right? So that kind of lumped them all together in each of the individual categories. The things that we measure in the survey are grit, curiosity, social awareness, growth mindset, classroom effort, and self-regulation. And so the students take a survey in the fall, we'll do a bunch this year in the winter, and then again in the spring. around those areas. And they ask questions like, when I'm at school, I feel inspired to try new things. And the student says strongly agree, but so then the favorability rating are the number of students who are reporting positive results in that particular area. And we've seen some waivers kind of up and down a bit. We see some pretty drastic swings school to school. Obviously, the thing you spend a lot of time on is usually a thing you hopefully see a lot of results from. So some of our schools that have really been diving into the data and the results and what you can use the platform to do are seeing some quicker increases in some of those things. And then some of the schools are asking us right now, Nick and I, for a lot more support with some of those pieces because they're seeing, whoa, timeout. Kids are actually, going in the wrong direction with some of the skills or things like that. Using the panorama or increasing those skills that we measure in Panorama was one of the coach report choices for the professional development day. We had about 200 people sign up. So that's quite a few of our staff that were looking for more and more ways. So some of the survey results that Amy shared earlier from committee was from that group. And their time getting to spend some time in the platform, because that's where we started with our first cohort session. And again, cohort means that of those 200 people, we broke them each into a group of 25 to 27. Those groups are just right at around 25. And then those same 25 staff will get together again in January and talk about what they did the first time. And then they committed to go back and trying something in their buildings. And then they'll come back and meet again in a team in January. And then that group will meet again in February. So it's this nice opportunity to network with 25 or so teachers from across our district, and then get to come back to that same group again to share ideas and to continue the collaboration. So those positive things we got in the survey were that time to collaborate with people across our district. And then we got a lot of, boy, it was nice just to have time to kind of explore the platform and really understand where these scores were coming from, or how many of our kids were reporting this or reporting that, or do we see any trends in some of that data? And then we'll share with you the playbook, which actually has lesson plans for the teacher. If your class is scoring low in this, here is a lesson plan that you might want to do in your classroom. Here's an activity you might want to do. So staff having the time to explore those things was really helpful. That's the feedback that we got from that day. I shared in committee, whenever you give a survey to teachers, and we had about 48 people fill it out, when you say what could be improved, and a large chunk of them say nothing, that's actually really positive results. So we were pretty pleased about that. Okay, so here are the results. And so remember, we give two different surveys in Panorama. One is measuring these skills, which are the ones tied to our strategic plan. And then we give a second survey called the well-being survey. And that was one we added 3-4 years ago.
About 3 years ago.
About 3 years ago, because it gauged a bit more about how kind of kids were feeling in school, that academic mindset, competency within the deeper learning work. We were trying to get a gauge around that. Are students having trusted adults at school? Do they feel safe? Things like that, because we know students will explore and do more things in a classroom where they feel both physically safe and then psychologically safe. So we'll share the results of both surveys. So these are overall district results. So in classroom effort, we have 72% of our students in grades 3 through 5 reporting favorably on that one. That's up. But then you can see in the first column is the percentages. The second column shows you where we rank on that one on a national level. So they give this survey in hundreds of districts across the nation. So we're in like the 20th to 39th percentile on that one. Curiosity, we are the only ones that's actually a custom survey they made for us. So they don't have any national rankings on that one. We wanted to measure curiosity given all of our deeper learning work and our project-based learning work. It seemed to make sense. That one is up 2 percentage points in grades 3 through 5. Social awareness is up 3 percentage points in grades 3 through 5. And that still sits us at the 20th to 39th percentile. Growth mindset, which is one that we've worked on for a while, is actually only at 55% favorable in grades 3 through 5, which is up a percentage point, but you can see where that has us ranking nationally. It means our kids actually understand the questions that they're asking, really is what that means. Then that's where we're ranking on that one, so significantly higher than many of the other districts doing the same survey.
If I could jump in on that
Yeah.
one too. I think the growth mindset being higher compared nationally is a reflection of a lot of our deeper learning, because when kids are doing deeper learning, they truly understand it and they believe it and they're excited by it. So that increases their confidence, and confidence has a lot to do with the growth mindset.
Yep. Grit, 52%, that one stayed flat from the last time we gave the survey, and that's in the 0 to 19th percentile. Amy, did you have a
I just
question?
want you to, can you just, what exactly are you looking at when you look at grit?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I can show you in there an actual, like the questions that they ask. I'll dive into that a little bit, Amy, so
okay.
you guys can see if that would be helpful. Yeah.
Yep.
Thanks for asking that. And so then emotional regulation is one that we've worked on for a long time. So it is good that that one was our highest increase. That's all that work you see in schools around zones of regulation and some of our mindfulness work. It's to teach students how they can regulate their own emotions and honor that they're having that feeling, but know what to do with it in the context of their daily work at school. Still in the 20th to 39th percentile, but we are trending in the right direction on that one. This is grades 6 through 12. So we take the survey in grades 3 through 12, and this is grades 6 through 12, and you can kind of look at where the data sits. We are not loving where we are ranking nationally on a bunch of those pieces. And you will also notice that when we shared all of our school report card information, our elementary schools are outperforming our intermediate and our high schools at the present time as well. So this is not shocking that they're also not reporting as favorably about their skills when it comes to school. So we had quite a few secondary teachers sign up for some of the sessions on how do you actually embed these lessons into a secondary classroom, which was great because it means it's a problem that we're working on solving together. All of Central High School chose to attend that particular cohort together as a whole school, because they're really working on having a unified approach to the work that they do. So that was really exciting. And I think it was helpful for them because now they have really specific things that they're following up with as a school team. And then here's the wellness survey. So this one is supportive relationships. So that's asking about a trusted adult at school or at home. Positive feelings, obviously, we all know what those are, and then challenging feelings. And so it's okay that that one's on the rise. It does not mean students are reporting more challenging feelings. It means they're reporting having the capacity to deal with challenging feelings. So that's an okay one to be on the rise. 87% supportive relationships. You can see where that ranks nationally. That one we're really proud of. It's having a trusted adult at school is something we have worked on for a long time. We ask a lot of questions around that. We try to make sure if kids are really struggling at school, they have mentors. If the quieter kids who are working really hard, but maybe are a little bit quieter, we want to make sure they're saying they have a trusted adult at school so that the attention at school is being shared in and amongst all the students. So those are markers we kind of look for when we get some of those results back. So that's grades 3 through 5, and this is grades 6 through 12. And again, supported relationships is our highest of all of them. So again, that's something we've definitely spent a lot of time on. It's still only 80%, which we'd like to see improved, but then it dives into farther. And again, I'll dive into it, show you the platform itself, but it dives into it further to talk about which schools, whether those are students reporting more issues at school or at home. And then it allows us to take that information and make sure we're wrapping some supports around schools that are maybe struggling with that one. But that also ranks high for us nationally. And that challenging feelings, again, that students are having mechanisms to deal with challenging feelings being so much on the rise. That is something we spent a ton of time on during the first year when we were virtual, and then coming back face to face, trying to help the kids understand the challenge of all of this in the world, and last year as well. So those are good results. We have nothing that's trending in the wrong direction. Yeah, Noah?
I may have missed this. This is compared to when? What's the comparator?
Oh, sorry. This would be compared to when we gave this survey last spring.
Okay, so.
Yep. And then it does longevity data as well when we get into the platform.
Okay.
Yep. So I took a few screenshots so that you could have like that big picture view, but then we can dive into some of the details on it too.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So speaking of, here we go. Well, I'll pull it up and then you can start talking about kind of what we're actually doing with it. I'll just show them a little bit more detail.
Actually, I have one other question while that's pulling up. like with test scores, do we see a dip of a change in this from spring to fall when kids are coming back from the summer?
It's
you can jump
changed.
in.
So it's been inconsistent because when we went virtual during the pandemic, our scores kind of went wonky for a little bit. So it's gonna be interesting to see where that trends. But certainly the fact that I think it's a testament to our teachers and counselors and social workers and all staff. When we've been back for a full year, full-time in person, you can see some of these going up because they're with their peers, they're with their teachers, and they're part of programs. Deidre mentioned before the fact that, the elementary school report cards are a little higher than the secondary. And so you had mentioned it's not surprising that the SEL data and the well-being data is higher too. And that's proof to what our teachers know now is the fact that, if you're a good instructor, you understand that addressing their SEL needs goes hand in hand. They're not separate. If you're gonna, make sure that you're a good math instructor, a good English instructor, that you are addressing their SEL needs. They're not exclusive of each other. So years and years ago, it used to be student services were the ones that addressed all these things. Now there's a real collaboration between all of the school and student services. So a lot of our role in terms of teaching SEL is supporting the teachers in doing this work. So sometimes they're doing it, sometimes we're co-teaching, sometimes we're doing it. But it's not, it's your job or it's my job, it's all of our jobs. So as counselors, we're teachers, and as teachers, they're counselors. So it really, and again, the data supports that those things go hand in hand, SEL and the school report card and that other data. So that's kind of where the culture has switched over the last couple of years in terms of how we're addressing some of this.
Yep. And so then you get trend data over time, and then I can dive all the way into the actual specific questions. We can separate this out by student gender. Right? So when it comes to this particular skill, are females reporting higher skills in this than males? I can do it by student race. I can do it by grade levels. I can look at this data from a million different angles to see what trends in the data it's telling me. And then Amy, this is where you can see some of the questions. So this is just on that first one of classroom effort. And so then I can dive in and see when your teacher is speaking, how hard do you try to pay attention? How much effort do you put into your homework for this class? How much effort do you put into learning new material in this class? Those are the kinds of questions that it's asking. And so then I go back in and I can dig up the one on grit if you are interested to see that one and what that one shows us.
And so our teachers are they're not just going into looking at the overall survey results, they're going in to look at specific questions.
Yeah.
And that really allows them to do some goal setting, because sometimes it can be overwhelming. Like, how do I address all of emotional regulation? That encompasses a lot of things for a young person. But when you can go in and you can look at which questions overall scored very low, then they can choose some of their SEL instruction based on that. And they can also look at it based on their classroom. So we're looking at data for the district. You can be broken down by school, but teachers can break down their SEL data by classroom. So if they can see particular questions that the majority of their students scored really low on, then they can incorporate that into some of their SEL teaching. So, and a lot of that SEL teaching comes from, Deidre mentioned this before, the playbook. So right in Panorama, it'll have a section where if your kids are low in this question or low in emotional regulation or what have you, then you can go directly to lessons that will support that. So they don't have to be pulling a rabbit out of a hat. And it really helps teachers who have to put so much time into their curriculum that they can have some ready-made lessons, and they don't have to be, not that they're not being flexible and adding to it, because teachers are very creative, but the core of it is there for them. And so that's what's neat about Panorama. It's not just the results, but it's giving you tools then to try to bring up some of those scores based on your results.
And so this is the one that shows the questions on grit, Amy. So like an example is, if you fail at an important goal, how likely are you to try again? Right. Well, so the iteration work that we are working to do with all of our students, where we ask them to try something and then make it better and make it better and make it better. Like, that's the kinds of things that speak to that particular one. And this is what Nick was talking about. So for grit, These are just one set of a couple of lessons, and then these little apples at the bottom are the teachers across the nation using the platform rank it so that you could know if it's like a good lesson to be used or not. And then it'll do those by grade level. So then the platform itself has all of those built into it so that teachers can look those up. That's part of what we gave them some time to do in that cohort at the PD day, was really look into their data and say, what's the thing you want to work on first? And then let's spend some time actually looking in here. Are there lessons in here that are good for that? Or we've then provided a bunch of other resources, because if you're not finding something that feels like, I mean, this is everything that's in there. It goes on for pages and pages and pages and pages. And then you can select it by, if I was a math teacher, where are there good ways, what are good lessons to incorporate in math? If I'm an English teacher, it'll filter that so that it really becomes specific for the teacher and how to do some of those pieces. And then in addition to that, we use the second step curriculum at the elementary level. So that's our core resource for the SEL instruction that happens every week. But now we have a ton of teachers who have taken that as a micro-credential. And so the parting gift of that one is you get a second step kit of your own for your classroom so that you have those lessons kind of at the ready. And then it's easy for the teacher to then pull out something that might be helpful in that situation. Do you have a question, Brandon?
I think so. So like with these kinds of lesson things, one of the pieces that I fought with my professors who were teaching for my professional certification is a lot of the things that they designed in order to teach students, and then they presented to us and we're working on it. It was all geared towards elementary. And with that, and seeing where our scores are, where we're seeing improvement in our elementary scores, but we're not seeing that kind of improvement with our higher level scores. Is Panorama actually something that's effective for the high school, or is it actually designed for, K-5? Because if it's not actually designed for high school, then using it there and trying to measure there, we're not ever going to reach the results we want. And so, because I'm thinking, oh, they have lessons. I imagine they have great lessons for elementary. But if I'm a teacher doing chemistry and I have my zinc and my hydrochloric acid and I'm blowing a bubble up with the gas that it makes and I'm lighting it on fire, I don't know when I'm going to talk about SEL during that lesson, even though that's part of the state standards, that they understand that reaction and what's taking place in there.
Yep.
So is this actually something that is moderated by teachers that are actually developing these lessons to include this? Are they tied to the state standards so teachers know that they can use them as an appropriate supplement in there? And then it's meeting the curriculum needs that we're asking them to get to.
So yes, is the answer, the overall answer to your question. I'll dive in a couple of the specifics. There are tons of resources for secondary in this playbook. Our elementary teachers are actually quicker to use, like second step, because they're much more familiar with it than they are necessarily to use the resources in here. We do also have a resource that's for intermediate and high school called Botfin Life Skills. We don't do as much with that one. Those are more on-demand sort of lessons than it is quite as broadly as the way we use second step. So lots of this kind of stuff is also addressed during base group or home base, or they call it something different in every single school. So there are parts of where we do all these lessons that are in there. The chemistry teacher is obviously not stopping that lab. I mean, if you can't entertain the kids and get them engaged with a lab like that, right? Our problems are different than what we otherwise had. But that chemistry teacher might also be struggling to get kids to complete assignments or do some of the lecture materials or those sorts of things that go with a lab like that. And they can either ask a student services staff member to come in and do some co-teaching in their classroom. They can bring some of these types of lessons in. Some of the lessons in the playbook are really good just for sport practices work around community building and, making a commitment to a class as part of a whole. So some of our teachers that are highly trained in restorative practices, then they probably don't use the playbook because they have the strategies that they already need. But that was definitely feedback from our secondary teachers at this last PD day, was they didn't realize how much was actually in there and how much they appreciated the time to kind of go in and explore. And we do give them a lot of permission, right? To say, you have the students in front of you if you need to take time to do lessons like this, if you need to take time to reset in the classroom, you absolutely should. Because some of those academic markers will come really much quicker with all the kids when that classroom community is set, when the students know that this is a safe place for them to try new things and things like that. So we give a lot of permission to spend that time developing those relationships and then cultivating those throughout the year, knowing that it's a balance of the amount of time you have. And so that's where like our guaranteed and viable curriculum guides are so important, because they narrow the standards to the ones that are absolutely have to's, right? And then you have flexibility to either be adding more content to that if you've got a group of kids who are super interested in something, or you've got a balance of time to do some of this work as well. So that's kind of where it all fits. Go ahead, Nick.
And just to piggyback on that, I mean, I appreciate the question. It's a good question, because if our SEL scores and well-being scores are lower in secondary than elementary, we want to be looking at what are we doing differently to raise that. So I really appreciate that question. So in addition to the fact that it does, specify different grade levels. So that's one part. And then also Deidre mentioned the Botfin. So this is the first year we have, the full Botfin curriculum fully immersed with teachers. We've had it kind of piloted the last 2 years. So all 6th, 7th, and 8th grade kids this year have Botfin life skills. So it's a lot of it is the foundation is drug and alcohol education, but then it really is fostered by decision-making, peer pressure, things like that. And so it's very uniform in the sense that the curriculum is taught to all 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. But the teachers have the flexibility over a time period when they're teaching it so that they can implement it in their classroom when they're seeing some of these issues. So, and one of the reasons we are making sure that we are fully immersing ourselves in Botfin is because of what you said, recognizing that our secondary scores are a little bit lower. So, and we're trying to get kids involved with it too. So for instance, tonight's not about Hope Squad, although I'd love to come back and talk about Hope Squad another night. But it's appropriate to bring up Hope Squads because it's about mental health and suicide prevention. But those kids are going into classes and talking about some of these things. We don't put too much pressure on them. They're not expected to be counselors and teachers, but other kids listen to other kids. So they're the ones that are addressing some of these things. So for instance, last year we had our Hope Squad kids come in and they talked about supportive relationships, and they talked about what it meant, and they got some feedback from their classmates in terms of what they're looking for from their teachers. So I think as time goes on, our good schools, all of our schools are going to recognize when we get kids, just like deeper learning, when they get them involved in the SEL learning, the scores are going to go up also.
What's the name of that program?
Botfin.
B-O-T-V-I-N.
And life skills. BOTV.
I know.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
And the other thing we talked about at committee tonight that Laura Sage and I had talked about a while ago and has come back to the forefront is actually adding an elective in mindfulness and self-management for students at the high school level. When I did some town halls with students, and not last year, but the year before, that is something kids said, we want to spend more time like working on how do we develop our skills in this area than just doing it in homeroom. And kids are pretty brutally honest. So they were like, hey, here's the deal. If you've got a really good homeroom teacher, you're getting really good instruction in this stuff. And if you have a homeroom teacher who doesn't love doing homeroom, you can tell. Was kind of what kids gave us feedback.
They're honest.
They're honest. Yes, they are. And so the kids were saying, we want more time for things like this. So we're exploring, we're hoping to bring forward an elective course in the spring. You just saw the course catalog for 23-24. So the one that comes out next, we'll be putting courses forward in the spring for the following year. And we're hoping to bring that forward as well, because kids are also asking for support and resources in these areas and more time on those things, but trying to find a balance of time with the curricular objectives and all of this, you got to fit it in somehow.
What's really neat too is that we have more and more schools who are doing mid-year surveys. So we survey all kids grades 3 through 12 in the fall and in the spring, but we have the option of doing it mid-year for schools that choose to. And so actually today I sent out an email asking how many schools were interested, and lots of emails were coming back. And it just shows how important that this data is to principals and to schools, because they don't want to just wait until the end of the year. They want to see that growth is happening. So Panorama puts positive pressure on all of us. Like, we have to sit and monitor our results. And it just brings everyone to the table, all staff members. It's not somebody else's job. We're looking at that data where many schools, like I said, are looking at it in the middle. So it's becoming more and more a part of the culture. And it's very understandable data. We don't have control over every aspect of a child's life, but when they're in front of us, we want to be able to give them the tools they can to emotionally regulate themselves and to persevere and be able to navigate themselves through the world. And in the end, our test scores should go up.
And then I'll show you this piece of the platform. I know you can't read that from there, but you can see the red, yellows, and greens. So this is now the student success platform. So it actually overlays how students are reporting on the SEL survey is the last column that you can see all the way to the far right. Where students are reporting on the SEL survey, the percent favorable, those bright reds at the top are 3 secondary schools, right? So that's again, where we know we have some work to do around those things. Then the opposite end is the academics. So right now that's just grades. It doesn't calculate in anything else but grades. So that tells us a bit like where students are having one or more failures in a course. And then it goes attendance and then behavior. And so you can see how many reds and yellows in that second column, right? So it's first is academics, then second column attendance. We don't have a whole lot of greens over there. And so that's why really spending some time paying attention to that one is really important for us. And then it's behavior, that's office referrals. And then we also can disaggregate that data by a million things. So we can look at it from race, from gender, from students identified as having services through an IEP, as students with 504s, as graduating classes, males and females. Just about anything that you can separate the data by, you can separate it by. And if I clicked into this farther, it will tell me right down to the individual student level, how students are doing in the snapshot. So it gets down to, they're super helpful when you're having attendance meetings with families, because what it gives you for an attendance meeting is actually a graph. And it'll have a blue dot if you were absent or a red dot if you were absent for the whole day, and a blue dot if you were tardy. So if you're working with a high school student, you may say to them, hey, do you feel like you're often tardy or absent from class? And take a wild guess what they all say back. I've never been absent. And then you show them this graph with all of these blue and red dots, and they're like, oh my gosh, I miss a lot of class. Yes, you do. Let's talk about like, how can we solve that problem in a super visual way, which helps versus just like a printout of a report for students and for families.
As a middle school counselor, I use this when we have our planning and scheduling conferences. So that's all about preparing a child for high school and scheduling for high school. So the first thing we do in the conference is go through an individual student success platform. And it's really nice for students to see that understandable visual screen about how their student is doing SEL, academics, grades, test scores, attendance. And it really fosters a great conversation about what the students' goals are going to be for high school. And so I find it to be just a very useful tool and get a lot of positive feedback for parents when we're using this.
Nick, do you want to talk a little bit more around how we support just teachers who are learning the platform and kind of some of the inquiries that you're having this year compared to other years?
I mentioned to Dieter before this started, I know part of my role is just to be there for support for teachers in terms of how to use their account and access their account. And a lot of it is with new teachers, but I haven't kept any specific data on how many people have contacted me, but it's just through the roof this year, and people just reaching out. How do I do this? How do I do that? A part of that, I think, is when Dieter and I met with the Panorama representatives last year, we made a commitment to do more training. We've always done training, but we haven't done it on a regular basis, and we started that this year. And I think that, that has had a huge impact because, just like the students, they'll do what they understand. And so we've really upped our game in terms of doing that training for staff. So, and I know that principals are doing a better job of that too, just in their individual buildings, having conversations at staff meetings, making school-wide goals in terms of what they want their attendance markers to be, what they want their SEL markers to be. So we have just a lot of different things that are happening. We've got the school-wide training, we've got the cohorts that Deidre mentioned, we've got people reaching out individually, and we have, one-on-one goal setting and one-on-one just in terms of tutelage and navigation, how to use this. So as time goes on, it's becoming more and more a part of our culture. And when people understand it better, they are using it better. So it's just kind of exciting for me. And full disclosure, throughout the course of my career, data has never excited me. I didn't get up in the morning and say, I can't wait to look at data. So that's why I'm actually the best cheerleader for student success, because it's so easy to understand. And that's why I like it. Not because I love data. I love Panorama because I don't get excited about data, but I understand that it's important. And every educator today has to understand how data is just crucial. But this is data that is so easy to understand. The visuals, the colors, it really makes it easy for people. And I think that's why a lot of different people are embracing it. I have coaches that reach out to me too, because they can put the members or club advisors too, but they put the members of their team in a special category where they can just go and boom, everybody on their team comes up and they can see everybody's grades and everybody's test scores and attendance. And it really makes it easier for them to be able to monitor. And that's, that's just an example of something that's just made things so simple for people. Yeah, I'm a big believer in what this is doing for sure.
Well, I'll add in, I'm not into numbers too, but this, I love this as someone who actually does this, who teaches literally skills to people, and it's just for mental health. I just think this is awesome.
Yeah.
This really breaks it down. It really shows what areas we need to work in. And I like the fact that we're embracing that we're whole people. So you need to have not only just your academics, but we have to teach our kids, like, how do you, behaviorally regulate yourself? How do you deal with those have those distress tolerance symptoms or skills, and those active coping skills when they need them the most. So I'm just like, this is like awesome. I love this data because I think we're going to end up really helping our kids and being balanced human beings just in general, and knowing how to deal with those strong and painful or those emotions that we have that, even as adults, we struggle with. So this is cool.
Thank you.
We enjoy it quite a bit. We've also done a much better job this year at communicating with all staff, our strategic plan goals, and then also our annual goals. So for our staff to understand where these pieces all fit and why we should take the SEL skills so seriously. Like that's been also, I think, really helpful as we've been trying to make sure that it makes sense to a teacher why we'd ask them to do something in a classroom, right? Because that's really important. And a big part of our role is to make sure that everything we're asking them to do makes sense within this bigger picture of the work that we're trying to do. All right, so I'll jump in and talk just a little bit around attendance. So this is a snapshot. I now get a weekly attendance report, and it tells me kind of trends in attendance school by school over time. And this will start to become part of that live dashboard. So we've talked a couple of times around this outwardly facing live dashboard where parents can check out some data pieces, where we are more transparent to the community just on more kind of live data and live pieces that they can see. Attendance is one we're definitely going to be sharing on a really regular basis. So I shared a spreadsheet with you guys a couple of weeks ago in my board update. There's also some behavior pieces in there. We have to be a little bit more sensitive around some of those pieces because you don't want them to be identifiable. There's only one behavior incident in a school, right? We don't want anybody to be able to figure out who that student is. So we won't be putting that information on an outwardly facing dashboard. I'll share that regularly with the board as an update so you can kind of see where we're, when certain things are spiking up. Lots of times emotional regulation is a skill that comes in really low. Those tend to go hand in hand together, and it just helps us kind of tackle the problem, or it helps us to know there's additional staff supports that are needed or other things for that school. But this is the attendance data right now. And you can see overall, our district attendance is at about 90 90.2. For the state average, that's a little bit lower. We're hoping for about 94% as a whole district. As you look down the individual schools, so this goes week to week, so it's 11-14, and then I got through 12-12 just in this snapshot, or I'm looking every week. The high school, Central is trending, their average right now is 83.1. We've got some work to do there on getting kids to actually come regularly to school. And then it ranges, Franklin's at 95.4. So that's like, again, about where we'd like to see people. Docky's attendance, we have to work on that one as well. Lots of our elementaries, the attendance is stronger, again, kind of consistent with some of the other data pieces we have. And at our secondary schools, we're struggling a bit more with the attendance pieces. So we're going to be working on a lot more outwardly facing communication to families about why this is so important, about why coming regularly to school is important, doing some more work with students at the school level to make sure that we're encouraging them to come to school. But outside of this being a strategic plan goal, because we want our kids in school, it also has this huge impact on those report card scores. So the state started adding a measure called chronic truancy to the report card scores a few years ago. So a student is considered chronically truant if they miss more than 17 days of school in a school year. And we found a challenge with the way we were marking that data at the elementary school. So the state now goes directly into Skyward and takes the data at the state level, and they'll send you back like, here's an error, this doesn't look right. But for the most part, it's whatever you report in your student information system goes directly to the state. Whereas we used to get the chance to kind of review that and say, oh, no. Hey, are you sure Joe was actually absent 29 days last year? Oh, no, he wasn't, and then you could kind of fix some things and send it in. Now it's a live poll. So you just don't have that same, so you better make sure it's right when you put it in your student information system. So Aaron and we've been working on this problem quite a bit with our data team now, with our school report card team. Figured out that they're marking a student absent from school when they miss more than a third of the day of school. Well, we were only taking attendance twice a day at the elementary schools. So the kids who were coming in late, if they ended up getting marked absent for the morning, we were marking them as chronically truant in lots of cases. So we were hurting ourselves with the systems issue. And you kind of do what you've always done until you realize that's really not the way to do it. So we've already adjusted that. And we went back and adjusted whatever data we could. Remember, we hold on to attendance data and the academic score data for 3 years. So it's a 3-year rolling average. So we're going to have a tough time with some of this attendance data in the school report card system for the next couple of years. But I'll show you specifically. So this is an example of Horace Mann's report card. And we get one of these for every single school with this much detail. You can read them, and there's a super awesome, very dry technical guide if anybody else wants to read it, but I'll tell you what I learned from it tonight so I can narrow it down for you. The top part is just their overall information. So 20.3% of the students at Horace Mann are identified as having services through an IEP or students with disabilities. 81% of the students who attend Horace Mann are identified as being economically disadvantaged. And then 8.7% of the students at Horace Mann are English language learners. So what the state does with that information is they use a calculator to decide how your overall score is then calculated. So half of your score is based on your test scores in general. For Horace Mann, you can see achievement for them is 5% of that score. So that's the number of students scoring at proficient and advanced. That only accounts for 5% of that score. 45% of their score comes from growth. And that's because they serve a high population of students that come from backgrounds of economic disadvantage. So it's the way the state tries to say, yep, we understand that if you're serving a large population of students who come from backgrounds of poverty, that growth in schools, mobility is going to be higher, and therefore your opportunity to grow them from one level to the next outweighs right now their overall kind of academic achievement. That's what we really want you focused on, is moving kids from one category to the next. And then 25% comes from targeted group outcomes. So those are students who we used to call that cell group data, right? So those are students with disabilities, students who are emerging multilingual, students that come from backgrounds of economic disadvantage. And it's the bottom quartile of those students. So it's the lowest, the students who score in the lowest quartile, whether or not you're moving those students further up. on the scores, right? So that's targeted group, and then on track for graduation. And then this breaks those down a little bit more. So on track for graduation includes chronic absenteeism. It includes school-wide attendance data. So that's twice where that piece of data gets calculated into the score. It then includes third grade English for elementary schools, and for middle schools, it includes eighth grade math. So that's all that makes up that bottom corner. If you're a high school, you also get a score in there for graduation rate. So that's where that one falls. And then you don't get a score for third grade math or eighth grade reading because you don't have third graders or eighth graders. But if you look at the targeted group outcomes and you look at growth, so Horace Mann had a 69.8 in English language arts for growth. So they outperformed the state average when it came to growth. And that makes up 45% of that overall pie. They were flat with the state average for growth, right, for mathematics. So that means 66% of the students who had been at that school for a full year grew during that whole level during their time there. That's pretty good, actually, right? Especially last year, given the challenges that we faced just with everything in the world, and schools had a really challenging year last year. So then if we look at their targeted group outcomes, right, achievement in that group, so that's the lowest quartile of a bunch of students who qualify for additional services, was 5.9%. The growth in that pocket of students was 85%. So 85% of the students in that bucket grew. 62% of those students were marked chronically absent, and they probably weren't all, when we get the actual list, they were not all chronically absent. Right. So there's an issue with the way we're collecting and reporting the data, because I started to say, like, time out. Some of these scores don't make any sense to me, guys. And we did a much deeper dive to kind of find where we had some anomalies in the way that we were accounting for some things, which then led us to take these next steps moving forward. And then attendance for them was 88.6 total. So if I have a student who qualifies for targeted group outcomes, right, and they are marked chronically absent, I'm getting kind of dinged for that in two different categories at the same time. Right? So it's having this overall impact on a bunch of things at our high schools, at our intermediate schools, at a few of our elementary schools. And so some of it is making sure that the practices are consistent one school to the other. And then some of it just came down to making some adjustments in the way we were accounting. Now we just mark 5 periods a day at the elementary instead of 2. And that means kids that are tardy to school won't end up on that chronically truant list. So there were some things we could do that were quicker fixes. There's some other things we need to do that are more long-term fixes to get us back on track with attendance. Because we can really be working hard at all of that SEL work and all of our academic work. But if we don't have the kids in front of us every day, right? And we had quite a few staff who transferred to Central by choice this year. And I was at Central helping out the week right before the Thanksgiving break. And I said, hey, how's the transition going? And we love it here. And this is amazing. And we're doing this amazing work. But if you could just help us get the kids to school every day, we feel like we could be making so much more progress. So we have to start working more closely with our families, doing a lot more communication around some of those things. There's a few districts in our area. Connie in our school services office has been looking at the practices of other districts in our area and what are other people doing about some of these pieces. We're really good at following our habitual truancy practices and policies, but they don't kick in really until kids have already missed a chunk of school, right? So then you're trying to solve the problem long after it's solvable at that point. So we're working on some of those things. But one of the things that we'll be coming to committee with in January is something called senior privilege option, where if a student has had good attendance their freshman, sophomore, and junior year, in the senior year, they get the ability to have a more flexible schedule and things like that, that they keep quarter by quarter as long as the rest of their attendance was good, right? So some incentive for the students who just got in some bad habits and aren't regularly coming to school to continue to come to school. And the districts around us that are using that, I've seen some pretty good increases in high school attendance. So we'll be bringing that to committee as hopefully an option in January. And then we went through and started adjusting some of the attendance codes. We're working with the schools on having more regular meetings with students around attendance and why it's so important. Some of our schools weren't having obviously big whole group meetings because we had gone away from that for safety issues, and now we're trying to get back in the habits around some of those things. And then also working really closely with our SROs and our social workers. We've added quite a few social workers, which has been huge, because they're the ones really diving in on some of these attendance issues with some of our chronically truant families, the ones who actually are absent more than those 17 days a year. And then trying to address it with our SROs earlier. So our elementary SRO, Scott, who was new to us last year, he's amazing. On day 2 and 3, we have him going out to meet with the elementary family to say, time out, we're seeing a pattern here that's not going to trend us in the right direction. Attendance patterns don't improve over time. So those kids who were missing 5 and 6 days in 3rd grade are the ones that are missing 10 and 12 and 15 days by the time they get to high school. So we're trying to tackle it quite a bit earlier. We've been doing that one for quite some time. And obviously you can see our elementary attendance is getting a little bit better. It's a little bigger animal to tackle at the middle schools and the high schools. So we're getting to that again and trying to get in some good habits around following up with those things sooner. Any questions on that piece? Yeah, Brennan.
Excuse me, the senior privilege and a more flexible schedule, what is that like? They can leave and come and go during their study halls, or if they have enough credits, they don't necessarily have to be there?
Yeah.
Okay. May offer looking into a junior level too. That was something that Monroe did.
Okay.
And that was called our responsibility pass. And so if you had RP, you could come in late if you scheduled right, or you could leave earlier, you could have a long lunch. That was particularly beneficial for athletes and people that are doing extra like curriculars or work. They can get out a little bit earlier. So I'd be interested on that. Can you tell me, like, communicating with the families more regularly?
Just reminding our families, there are some of the school districts in our area who send out a district-wide communication once a week on reminding kids to regularly be at school and the importance of attendance and all of those things. We were doing a lot of that really regularly and frequently. We were working with a big attendance grant for a while, and we were doing a bunch of those sorts of things. And then just in the last couple of years, some of that kind of communication has fallen off. So whether that's incorporated at the school level when the principal sends out their weekly update, or whether or not we start to just make sure that our families understand missing a day or two of school here and there actually is a bigger deal. And it is not that we want people coming to school if they are sick. Please still stay home if you are contagious or you are sick, right? Because that's not going to help anybody. But it's that more regular communication on why it's so important versus we had something else going on today and therefore we didn't come to school.
So with that though, like people that are paying attention and watching this right now, what is the importance? Like, is there a monetary component to being at school and having higher attendance? Like, does that 4%, if we go from 90 to 94, does that get us more money for our district? What does that do for us?
Well, it doesn't do anything for us from a monetary level. It certainly is going to have an impact on these school report cards, right? Big time. And that is a credit to the students we get to serve, the teachers we get to work with every day. They're working awfully hard for this to be kind of where some of that is showing back, right? And it is really about the student experience at school, right? We know the students are having a better experience at school when they're able to be there more regularly. But yes, if there was a monetary incentive, that would be a little easier, Brendan, because that's the tough part about attendance is it's really just about the whole system being able to function better. And especially for our high school kids, I mean, missing 2 or 3 days a week, some of the kids are missing. That is going to be near impossible for you to, that's where you see lots of failure rates is when kids are just literally not coming to school.
Okay. And I guess so with that, the communication then, is it, how are we structuring that? Is that I apologize, I have questions, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
But how are we structuring that? Is that something where it's like, you better be at school because that's XYZ, or is it like, are we actually then communicating to the community and saying, let's help everyone get here because this will help our community, this will do this, like, is it more of a global approach? Or is it like, you have to be here because,
Or
you
X,
know.
Y, yeah, way more of a global approach, and that was kind of the approach we took before, just on when is it okay, like informing families, when is it okay to come to school versus when you should stay home when you're sick.
Mhm.
Right, so we have lots of students who will say, oh, I'm staying home today, we're having a bad day with our asthma, and so if there's a school nurse working with that family, of course, if the student needs medical care, we want them to go get medical care, but there's lots of days when maybe they're choosing to stay home when actually we have mitigation strategies for that at school, and that student could be at school. So making sure that families know when it is appropriate to actually keep your child home for a medical reason and when they should be coming to school. So we have all sorts of communication around that from our school nursing team. We have lots of communication just around the overall impact on life outcomes and graduation rates and all of those things when students are regularly in attendance at school. So families really do understand how important it is. Lots of times when you're actually having that conversation with a family, they don't realize how quickly all those days adds up, right? So looking at like the panorama chart with the family, they're frequently like, oh my gosh, we had no idea, because it feels like one day this week and one day 2 weeks from now. And right, they have no idea how quickly that all adds up. So just really making sure families are informed, that they understand what are the resources we have at school to be able to support their child, and then making sure that they get where that's having an overall impact on their students' experience. Right? There's all kinds of research around, attendance and early grades and literacy outcomes and future growth outcomes and future income. And there's all kinds of research around there. So it's really just a matter of sharing a bunch of that. So people really do understand why this is so important.
As a counselor, we see a lot of mental health needs, why students are staying home. A lot of times students are staying home for anxiety and other mental health needs. So one of our jobs as counselors and everybody in student services is to directly reach out to those families and talk to them about what we can provide for them when they come to school, and how staying home in the long term is going to increase their anxiety and increase their mental health needs. But that's a specific example.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I have a son who is trying to already at 6 avoid school, so
Yeah.
I certainly understand. Just more of like, what does it mean for our district? And if we're looking at things like people yelling at us for our report card, but then also understanding that you can help by supporting your neighbor to help them get to school, help them, support them, work and, take the village to raise the youth, then I mean, that's something that we can do.
Yeah.
I-
And that is definitely the approach. That is the intention to take. And then to go a little hardcore, a little sooner on some of the families that are really struggling, right? And what is the barrier with coming to school, right? And for some kids, it's, a alarm clock. Great, we can get you an alarm clock or, whatever it is. And for some families, there's way larger barriers to that. And then we're able to refer them for services so that they can get some stability for their child with coming regularly to school. So it's kind of a combination of both.
I have one more question if other people don't have them.
Ask your question.
Okay. The last one that I have is with addressing attendance with the SROs earlier.
Mhm.
My concern is it being an SRO. One of the pieces, and not that SROs are, we have fabulous SROs. But if we're talking about our community and the diversity of that community and positive feelings, if you start involving an SRO on the attendance, then that may not lead to those positive feelings, which is part of the whole panorama. Is there a way, rather than it necessarily being the SRO, but having one of our mental health people or having someone else that's calling, doing like we have for our extra help that we have in the hallways of the high schools, checking on kids, doing these things like building the relationship to be, we really need you here. How can I get you here? What can we do? Rather than necessarily doing the SRO, because if it's in a high poverty area, if it's in a area where you have minorities, and SRO will be seen more as adversarial than actually as helpful, even though our push is to, really just to help the kids be at school.
It's a combination of all of those people, right? And so it's the SRO getting involved. The SROs usually only get involved when we're starting to get into habitual truancy at like day 5, day 10 type situations. We find that getting them involved a little sooner if our staff has already done some of those pieces, really in an effort to bridge the gap. right? And it's in an effort to say we're a whole community and we have other resources. A couple of those kinds of home visits have netted us, Jesse who leads the SROs calling me and saying, hey, we found out this family needs a boatload of things. And are there things you guys can provide? And we can find some community resources for them. So it's really not intended to be a punitive measure at that point. But it also is, there are some families for whom we just send the social worker, right? There are some families where it's usually the SRO and a school staff member to talk about collaboration and communication. It is very rare that we just send the SRO unless we're doing a wellness check. Right? We haven't heard from nor seen that child in a few days. We get somebody over who has the capacity to go in the house and make sure the kid's okay. In a different way, that's a different thing, but it's usually not the SRO on their own. It's usually with a staff member or staff members a number of times.
And after lots of other.
And
interventions.
lots of other interventions and all these other pieces before we get that far.
And that's the only thing, because I
Yep.
know that even for my family, when I was younger, my parents would become very adversarial if there were any officers involved in anything, and we weren't necessarily in an area that had that problem or that we were that problem.
And we recognize that concern, which is why our SROs are so good about just getting to know the kids and becoming a part of the culture. Our SRO at Frank Lloyd Wright, Officer Randland, I mean, he's in the lunchroom, he's in the hallways, he's developing relationships, he's fist bumping kids.
He's
And
got a
so,
following.
what's that?
He does.
He's got a following.
He does. But yeah, like Deidre said, then when we do have to get them involved, it is A, after many other interventions have been done, and B, in a collaborative approach. Because those are valid concerns,
Right.
absolutely.
But also catching things and those patterns way earlier. That's really kind of the goal versus waiting. Once you're at 10 days, once you're at 5 days, it is super hard to get back to regular attendance. So we're just trying to catch the patterns a little sooner.
And often families appreciate reaching out, you know, and when I call, it's not because they're in trouble, it's what can I do to help? And a lot of times, you know, parents just don't know, I don't know what to do. My child's anxious and they refuse to go. And then we work together and we make a plan, we get students in. And it really helps when we can catch them early.
Thank you.
Other questions? Better for maybe. I have
Yeah.
some questions.
Okay.
First, the DLVA attendance is a little concerning to me.
Mhm.
Because they have the least amount of effort to get to school in the morning. And so do we have any subset information about why? I mean, they're like the worst.
Yeah.
On average over the last month, for what we're looking at anyways, right?
For sure. Yeah, that is every single week when I look at that, I ask that same question, Noah. Believe me. So the importance of those synchronous times at our virtual academy are super important. And so that's where you're seeing some of those attendance issues is some of the older kids, some of the students who chose a virtual option, maybe should have chosen a face-to-face option, or we should be finding alternatives, or those are the ones really impacting the attendance there.
Okay.
But Devin and Adam are also working on looking at that they have a lot more flexibility on attendance as a charter and as a virtual school. And so are they employing some of the flexibility that they're able to use while still maintaining the integrity of the program? That's what they're analyzing right now. Because I said the same thing. I was like, how in the world does the virtual school not have better attendance?
I mean, I can see some kids taking advantage of that, but yeah, I mean, they still have to be face to face. I know some things you can do
Yes.
different hours, but
Yeah.
there's face to face time requirements, right? As far as
So,
with those
yeah,
sectors.
much like everything else, we tend to be much harsher judges on ourselves here than maybe all of our other friends are using. And so we were saying very stringent on some things. So we just asked them to make sure they're following the DPI rules and maintaining, again, the integrity of the programming they're doing. Because some virtual schools have no synchronous time. And that's not what we decided that we wanted to have here. It's not what we're trying to support. It doesn't align to our deeper learning work. But yet at the same time, use some of the flexibility that's provided so that the attendance is actually a bit tighter there than it looks right now.
Okay. Do we have any data on open enrollment students versus resident students for attendance? Because obviously transportation is not provided for open enrollment students, and I can see that being a barrier for a lot of people, especially if those parents are working or for whatever reason are unable to physically get a child to school that lives in a different, city.
Yep, so we do keep that track of both, right? So the obligation you commit to when you have students that are with you under open enrollment is that they are your student and you treat them much the same as you do any other student. So we're really stringent about that. However, if a student is habitually truant from school and they are open enrolled to you, you follow your truancy policies just like you do for every other student, but at the semester, you say to them, we're terminating the contract because clearly the barrier of distance to school or some of these other pieces, you need to be coming to school every day. And
Mhm.
so we'll have a stack at each semester that just aren't able to, if you can't get here, then it's not an advantage to attend in another school district. So those are part of the normal open enrollment process, and we'll have a few of those at semester again this year.
And lastly, for me, and this is not to deal with attendance, this is more to do with Panorama. Do students see their own data?
In some schools, they're really good about using that as part of their conferences with students, as part of their presentations. They use them at parent-teacher conferences, and some of our schools are still working on that. So they should be, right? It's the students' data. It's amazing information to look at as a parent. For our students who are at TAC, who get that lady to talk to them about their life choices all the time. I frequently do that with sitting next to the students at TAC and saying, let's see how we ended up here. Right. And we open their panorama and we look at it, and the kids will frequently say to me, why has no one shown me that before? So we are working. That's the part that we've really made it an effort this year to make sure staff understand why it's such an important part of our goals and where it fits with the rest of our work. And we're going to see a lot more of that because we've seen a lot more staff and principals really getting it and saying, okay, time out. If that's a marker and all these other pieces improving in my school, right? Like I'm in and I want to do more with it.
And it is useful, as I mentioned, when they see it at their planning conference or scheduling conference, the student and the parent. We're encouraging teachers to use it at parent-teacher conferences, but as a uniform policy, that's something we need to.
Students can't log in and access their own data. The platform doesn't have that. So there isn't a way to manage it. It's not like Skyward where students can have a login and parents can have a login. It doesn't work exactly like that. So it has to be because the teacher has actually shown it to them, but we should be showing it to families and to students on a way more regular basis.
So
A couple of our schools are amazing at that. And then the other schools are working on it now.
So if a family wants to see their students' data, how do they do that?
You can ask the teacher or the counselor and they should be able to pull it up for you.
Okay, but it's not something they could like access from home. They would have to be in a building.
Yes.
Or like a Zoom meeting and
Yeah.
share a screen sort of situation.
Yep. But we can print,
out
you can
also.
print people's reports, so you could ask somebody to print it for you and it would come home then.
Can we just like download and email it to parents?
You'd have to do that individually by student. That's the only problem with that. So there would be a time constraint to that,
Yeah,
would be
no.
pretty significant.
All right.
So,
I would prefer as we are doing, have more and more encouragement for schools and teachers to be having it a part of regular conversations, because I think the data is most useful if you can talk about it as opposed to here it is.
The only thing is, I did notice that for sex, we looked at binary options. Are there more than just binary options in Panorama so that because who selects that?
it's whatever's in your student information system. That's how it's pulled directly into Panorama from there.
So in Skyward.
Yep. So Skyward, however students have identified in Skyward is how they identify in here. It pulls it directly.
Is Skyward only binary?
I believe it is at this point. Aaron, do you know the answer to that one? Skyward. That have other options.
Historically, the answer's been no, and that students can be their legal name on the first, it had to be the name. Now, recently, Skyward has updated that, but in previous years, students could have a preferred, like, surname. Couldn't change their legal.
But it only identifies male, female, correct?
Okay. It's a software with you. So just talking about mental health and things like that.
Yeah.
Obviously it's a big role for those who don't identify either as a binary.
Yep.
Gender. And so it's just something that, I mean, I know it's a software limitation, but when we're talking about these sorts of things and mental health and how that can affect someone's mental health. To keep in mind if there's other things that we can implement to try and be able to serve everyone.
Yep.
Who's in our district, so.
Yeah, that's where the data comes from. So until that one system changes and because the state pulls data directly out of that, then the state sort of determines a bit of how that's kind of set and established. That part, like a student doesn't have to enter any of that information into here, so it's not so in your face that there's not an option that kind of meets who they are right now. And so that's just background identifiable information for us to pull.
Any other questions? Well, thank you so much for the presentation. Looking forward to the next updates that we'll get about this to see how things are going.
Sound good?
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I do.
Oh, yeah, I do.
So we're gonna move on to our final workshop meeting, 11.2. Financial stability and efficiency, district office relocation. And Dr. Lexman, are you starting off?
Yes, I'll do a quick introduction here and then turn it over to the experts. That'll walk us through the various things we've considered. So the district office or permanent district offices, right, has been part of the facility master plan since we started that whole planning process. We sold these buildings in part of recovering from the financial challenges we had 7 years ago. But then continued to lease this space. Leasing space is not a very good use of public funds when we have plenty of space for offices. And so as we move through the school consolidations, another piece of this is trying to get to a decision-making point around permanent district offices. And team will walk us through a number of considerations or options that were considered. And then various kind of, what are the priorities of what we're trying to accomplish in getting to a point of a recommendation and the board giving us some direction about when and where to go. Like I said, in internal communication, there's a bit of a timeline thing that's clicking here in terms of when we have to give notice and can we extend or not extend and how expensive that does that get. And then the whole piece about potentially bidding separately, going out for request for proposals, although we've incorporated language in the approvals for the facility master plan that would give us latitude to work with vendors that have been identified tied to that plan. Although there's a piece around public perception and so that's all going to be kind of covered as we work through the workshop. This isn't a decision-making point. It's really to get your brains into the conversation so that when we do come back and say, okay, we need some direction now because it's time to start making the wheels turn. At least you've spent some time thinking through this and talking with us about it. So with that, I'll turn it over to Aaron and Steve.
Yeah, and so Steve's gonna jump in here in a second, but I want to just thank Steve, and with us are Mark Wilson from CG Schmidt and Brian Sanford for Architect. So familiar faces probably from the Zoom meetings, from the facility master plan and school consolidation for months, but really want to thank them for their work on this. This is what you're seeing tonight is roughly 6 months of their efforts and time, and just really want to thank them for their time. So with that, I'll turn it over to Steve and he'll walk you through it.
Thank you very much for adding us to your meeting tonight. I know it's going to make it a little longer night, but as Dr. Lexman said, it is kind of a time issue as well, given our lease and when we have to notify them and all that. So here's, I'm not going to go through all of this, but this is the agenda of what we're going to go over tonight. And so there's a slide or slides for each of these items that are on the agenda. And then we'll end up with recommendations and then next steps as well. So the rationale for the relocation, as Dr. Lexman said, is the current lease expires March 31st of 2024, which sounds like a really long time from now. But when you're dealing with remodeling and construction, it goes by really quickly. There is an option that was written into the initial lease for a 2-year extension. We have to notify the leaseholder by June 30th of 2023 if we want to extend that lease for that 2 years. And it's approximately $700,000 in additional lease payments. That's the total cost for those 2 years if we were to use both years. And then one of the things that we want to look at too is right sizing the district office. As Dr. Lexman said, this is part of, we're right sizing the schools, we're right sizing the district. It only makes sense that we right size the district office as well. Currently, with between the 5th and the 6th floor, There's a little over 24,000 square feet that we have, including the boardroom area here. And what we're proposing between a renovation of 9333, on the first floor that isn't being used now, and a smaller addition, we'd have about approximately half of that space that we currently have now. And then we repurpose current underused space because it's just sitting there now. We own it, but it's there. It's not developed. It's just empty space. And then avoid paying ongoing lease payments. And so, as Aaron mentioned, we have a representative from CG Schmidt and from Bray Architects here. And Bray has helped us with this process of the conceptual exploration of what the different options could look like, making drawings and renderings, layout recommendations, and then also code compliance advice. And then CG Schmidt has helped us with feedback on those concept and drawing, constructability advice, estimated costs, timelines, and then code compliance as well. So in determining where, we could possibly go, what space was available to us and what we'd be looking for, we went through and looked at all the different spaces that we have here currently at 1205. And this is a list of all of those areas as well. Based on that, then, way back in, we started this process, I believe in July, I gave some initial information to Bray, in the architectural firm, about the different number of offices we had currently, how big they were, and what we were using them for. And then that really was the starting point for going forward. So then some of the options that we considered were relocating to 9333 West Lincoln. We looked at having an addition above the existing multi-story building. The Wellness Center would remain on site then. We looked at adding an addition above the existing single-story building. And that's back where the IT offices are, the loading dock and the maintenance staff have their work areas. The Wellness Center would remain on site again with that. Then we looked at renovating the entire unused portion of 9333, but also doing some minor remodeling to the what's currently the Wellness Center, but then the Wellness Center would need to be relocated. So what we did is we looked at three possible options of where the Wellness Center could go. One of them would be at Lane. And if you remember from the earlier discussion tonight, the rec center is going there. And so where the big gym is now and the offices, that whole entire structure is going to remain. And what the recreation department talked about is demoing everything else. What we were looking at as possible relocation of the Wellness Center was adjacent to that, keep 3,000 square feet, because that's roughly the size of the Wellness Center, that would be adjacent to the existing building that they're going to be using. Another option would be that we would have a standalone, roughly 3,000 square foot building on the Lane property somewhere. Based on what different phases they may want to do, and when they do them, that could determine where that would go. And then the other was we looked at Longfellow as a possible option of relocating the Wellness Center as well. So these are the drawings of options 1 and 2. Option 1, you can see that the red, that's at the back end of the current first floor level. So at this, on the side where it says option 1, that's West Lincoln. And then the Wellness Center is on the bottom portion of that gray on the left side of the red. And so what we would do, we proposed putting an addition all along that back side there of that main floor. And then option 2 shows a smaller addition on the area where I talked about where it's the information technology offices and the loading dock. And then this is the drawings of option 3, A through C. The first one with the blue, would be the existing remaining part of Lane where the recreation department would be. And then the red would be the Wellness Center. And then the option 3B That rectangle is about 3,000 square feet, and that's the wellness center. And that's where we talked about that could really be located or relocated anywhere because it's a new construction, or I mean, it's new construction, so it could be anywhere on the Lane property. And then option 3C, you can see in the turquoise, that's where the wellness center would go. And then the little red spot, that's an entrance that would go into the wellness center. So of those options, option 1 was one that we looked at, and then we said, you know, that's at least one of our least favorite ones. So we discarded that one. And some of the reasons were the addition would require an elevator and egress stairs. And when we start adding egress stairs and an elevator, then that gets into a lot of additional costs. Include additional spaces that aren't necessarily needed at this time. Structurally, it'd be difficult and cost prohibitive with additional structural steel and reinforcement, replacing a portion of the roof deck. Because if you go in that area and there are steel beams that go across it or the decking, but what we'd have to do is would have to have additional decking that would be added to support the weight of the new addition. And then the wellness center would have to be temporarily relocated while we were doing that construction. So we'd have to find a place for them to go temporarily, and when construction was done, then come back. And then options 3A, B, and C, which was relocating the wellness center from 9333. No addition would be required, but would include additional space again. And then this wellness center would have to move off site to Longfellow or Lane. And that presents another host of problems or issues in terms of timing and additional cost. So for option 1, the estimated cost and the timeline, and remember, we're looking at a March 30th of 2024 is when we'd need to be in somewhere. So that option 1 was $10 million plus, and it would have an August 1st of 2024 move-in date. Option 2, which is renovating the existing non-used portion of 9333 and the smaller addition, that would be 7.8 million, and that has a May 1st deadline. But one thing I should mention with that, the May 1st is for everything to be completed. The way we have it drawn up now, if we were to go with that option, is the addition would all be leadership and learning. Having conversations with Dr. Luxman and with Deidre, they said if for a number of months they needed to relocate or work somewhere temporarily, that they would be able to do that while that addition was completed. The renovation work could be done earlier so that we most likely would be able to move in by the March 30th deadline. And then the 3 options with the relocating of the wellness center, it was 9.2 million with a July 1st, an 8.2 million with an August 1st, and then a 7.6 million for May 1st.
So maybe just to clarify them again, Stephen, I know the options really well. So option 1 is essentially adding a second story on the 9333 building. That's the elevator option, hence the largest cost. And Steve kind of explained why that was kind of removed. Option 2 is taking the existing space at the 9333 building, leaving the wellness center where it is, and renovating the existing space with a small addition on top of IT. There's no elevator needed then. It's kind of, you walk into the wellness center, it's the main floor, you just go in through a door. And there's the way that they can structure that is that way we could get out of the lease in time, and then there'd be an additional section to be done. And then 3 is the relocation of the wellness center under each phase. So you can see that I think I'm correct that a standalone building is almost cheaper than to renovate current space there.
It is.
So,
Yeah, because there's 2 stories existing there, would have to have stairwells, added because I think the grade difference or the elevation difference is what, 2 feet, 2 inches, I think, different. So we'd have to add ramps. So there's just a lot of additional costs that we'd have to do if it was tied into the existing, or I guess I should say the proposed remaining portion of Lane.
just a quick summary. So.
Thank you. So then what we did too is we looked at, if we're gonna renovate 9333, we did the whole long-range facility master plan, so we want to keep in mind the CIP costs that are associated with that building as well. And if we're going to be renovating there, adding an addition, then we need to look at those CIP ideas and which ones of those do we need to do now, or does it make sense to do now? Which ones can we defer and which ones can we just put off until a later date altogether? So what this does is this goes through and it puts it in two different categories as needed and alternate. And you can see that if we were to do just the needed, that $7.8 million that we had for option 2, we could take off about $606,000 off of that by deferring a couple of those projects. It wouldn't impact anything in terms of safety or anything, but it would give us the flexibility to be able to, if we wanted to take, a little over $600,000 off as well. And then at the bottom, you can see that the total CIP costs for 9333 were about 3.5 million. And what we've accounted for here between the needed and the alternate is about 2.2 million. So that 7.8 million includes the $2.2 million listed here. And then again, looking at some of the investigated and discarded option 3, we looked at Longfellow, but it occupies only a small portion of that building. And so there'd still be a number of operating and maintenance expenses that would be required for the entire building, even though we'd be using a smaller portion of it. And there is no elevator there. So the majority of the building would be inaccessible for non-ambulatory individuals. And then at Lane with the wellness center attached to the remaining Lane building, possible negative impact on the recreation department, depending on where and when they wanted to do the initial and future phases. Demolition of the existing building would require an egress stair. And then I talked about the elevation difference. And then the timeline challenges also with that. Because the wellness center wouldn't be able to relocate until we had the work done for wherever the new wellness center was going. And then the wellness center as a standalone building, again, the possible negative impact on the recreation department, new construction would be required, and then the same timeline challenges. And then also there's been some initial discussion with Dr. Lexman from the city about the city may want to do some things on part of the Lane property. There hasn't been any formal discussions about that. They just talked to him about that once. So there is some, I guess there's lack of clarity on what they may or may not want to do, and if that's something that would be in the district's best interest and the community's best interest or not either. And so then the remaining option, again, is that addition above the existing single-story building. At 9333, the wellness center would remain on site. And again, on the left side of this diagram is 93 or is West Lincoln. And then the bottom gray portion, that's the existing wellness center. And then you can see all of the dark turquoise and the light turquoise. That is the new renovated area. And then it lists all the different offices of where they would be. And then you can see that red and the pink. That is the new addition, and that has the workroom for leadership and learning. It has 5 offices. It has a conference room, and then it also has a workroom. And that top pink area on the upper right, that is a stairwell. Because even though we wouldn't have to do an elevator, we would have to do a stairwell from that portion of the building to the outside. And so based on all of this, our recommendation was that we would do option 2, which we just saw, where the wellness center would remain on site. It's 7.8 million is the estimated cost, and that includes the remodeling, the addition, the site costs, which are concrete, asphalt, new canopy, ADA ramp, etc. The soft costs like permits and blueprints, And then, as I said before, it includes 2.2 million of CIP items. And as I also mentioned before, about 606,000 of that could be deferred if we wanted, and we thought we wanted to do that. And so the next steps would be, have the discussion tonight, but then possibly have it on the board agenda for next week for approval. And then we could issue a notice to proceed to Bray and CG Schmidt. Because all of these schedules that we have up there are predicated on a January 1st of 2023 notice to proceed. And then we'd give if we were to do all of that, then we'd officially give termination notice to the land leaseholder, would be able to do that in a timely manner. And then one of the things that we talked about in the committee meeting last week was looking inside the district for possible options for relocating the boardroom, professional development space, and other large attended events. And that is everything I have. I know that was a lot of information in a short amount of time. It's like I said, it's about 6 months worth of work condensed into like 15 slides. So.
Yeah, so there's really two big questions. But the first one I think is, love to hear your conversation just about the solution that's being presented now, which is essentially going back to 9333 board leaving the wellness center. And then the second question is really about the process of either moving forward with Bray and CG Schmidt or going out through an independent or a separate bid process. So I think talk about kind of the solution first and then the process second. If that's all right.
I think the first major question is, where's the money coming from? You didn't say anything about that.
Great question. Yeah. So we have currently, as the board's aware, we have
We didn't get that
dollars
much money.
in Fund 49. And so currently we have just under 8.5 million in Fund 49. So that's where I would recommend using the dollars for. I think that was probably a lot of the board's intents, for the sale is to find relocation for this building too. So yeah, so those costs, whether that be the full 7.8 million or the 7.2, subtracting out the 600,000 that Steve had talked about, looking at delaying the addition, that would be additional savings. I think that cost to not do the addition would put the price tag at about 6 million, I believe. So
Yeah.
there's some options the board can weigh through, but as Steve talked through that, we certainly have the dollars that to do something like that.
Right?
How much again was the sale price of this building?
I have to pull it up. I think it was 6.8.
Because I hear 7.8 million, and even though we have funds, when I think of the other schools that need work, I have a hard time being a taxpayer as well, I have a hard time swallowing that pill when I know we need that money elsewhere too. That just seems like a really high number to me when we have schools that have facility needs. So I struggle with that. I mean, I know we can't stay here, but I also know we were previously at 9333. So the sentiment of us spending $7.8 million to go back to a building that we previously already had our district offices at, I can't see that going very well. So I guess my follow-up question to that, were other locations considered? We're going to have Madison vacant. We're going to have Longfellow vacant. Were any of those considered as possibilities?
They were not.
Why not?
Whoa. Longfellow was-
Pardon me?
Longfellow.
Well,
was-
Longfellow was for the relocation of the wellness center.
Oh, for the one.
But we had looked at Lane was, going to be used for the recreation department, and they were going to demo the part that they weren't going to use initially. And then they had multiple phases where they were going to add different things to the Lane property. So we didn't look at that. And then Longfellow, part of it is that, the CIP costs that are in those buildings as well.
Mhm.
So to get the same number of square footage, and most likely would cost as much, if not more. And then would also, if we're not using all of that building, would have some demolition costs as well.
I hear most likely, but I don't know. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more research done into those other options, because they're buildings that we have. And if there's even a possibility that those costs would have been lower, might have been beneficial.
You know,
to look into.
part of, and that's a great question, and really valid. But part of the reason that, like, when we started talking through some of the other options, it became, in our opinion, kind of a non-starter. The section at 9333 that we were in, I know Marty had been there a couple weeks ago with us. I mean, picture this space wide open with no ceiling and no drywall. So from a renovation perspective, we thought there's a lot of room here. This, from a functional perspective, has to be the cheapest option because it's got the lowest CIP total from the facility master plan. We don't need ADA accommodations beyond the ramp. So from just like huge box checks, it seemed to be the reasonable option to explore first. But I hear your comment, and it's valid,
What happened to and I have not been to 9333 in a long time other than the wellness center once or twice, but what happened to the previous office space that was there? What kind of shape is that in, or does it exist, or was that demolished for the wellness center? I mean, what does that previous space look like?
They're in the back section of it where we're proposed putting that long addition on top. The walls for the hallway are finished. They're I should say they're plastered, but they're not painted. But everything else in that area is all just wide open space. Save for the columns, the support columns.
Sorry, when we did the wellness center work, there was some roofing work that needed to be done. There was some water damage. So while we were in there with the wellness center, we just gutted the rest of it and it's just been empty sitting. We use it for storage right now. The other pieces around the options at Madison, it's possible we could go back and explore it. But one of the challenges during the whole school consolidation process and one of the perceptions in the community is we were closing Madison for our offices, right? And so that's still there. And so moving back to Madison presents, I think, some perception challenges. Longfellow, not only the CIP costs that come with it, but it's probably the most viable property for redevelopment. So that it would attract developers that, so we could sell that. And so that's why I think that's not on the table for a number of reasons, but that's one of them as well.
I hear the concern about, during the whole process, the community having that fear about the offices being located at Madison. But I think at the same time, if that was looked at the same way these other locations were looked at, and dollars were attached to it. And if that happened to be the lowest cost option, I think you can alleviate some of those concerns because we were doing due diligence. We looked at other options. And then if that did happen to be the lowest one, I think that would have taken away a lot of those concerns. Now it looks, I don't know, now we almost have the other concern where it could look like we just eliminated that because of those concerns and we have no idea how much that's going to cost. So I guess that's where I'm coming from in that regard. That's all I got for now.
Other questions, comments?
I agree with Brian. I have a hard time. We still, I just have a hard time. We just went to the community for a referendum. And now we have schools that don't have air conditioning. I know our admin needs a place. I know we figure it out. This $7 million is a lot for me to, I'm kind of sitting in the same boat with Brian, I guess.
Mr. Burns?
This 7.2 or 7.8, depending on we defer stuff, is really not the cost of the offices. The cost is actually 5 million and then 2.5 or 2.2 million in CIP changes. So we have that, but even at 5 million, I'm kind of sitting in the same spots. And as I've thought about this, like, we are closing buildings and we're talking about, well, what will it cost to do that? Like, what would it cost for offices to move into offices? Because there will no longer be a principal, secretaries, a wide open gym that you can put a gopher farm in. Like, whatever it is, there's space there that we don't have to put in a lot of cost, and it can still be temporary, but then it also then puts our students and staff in front of admin, because how many admin staff, like district office staff, do we have? Or even at 5 million, we have 20. Like, that cost, how many ACs can $5 million put in? 1, 2, maybe? And then we're serving 400 people versus 20. So I mean, just from a per person, per pupil standpoint, putting the money towards AC units to get our schools on par with where they need to be taking care of those instead of taking care of admin. Like, we can sit in the middle of a gym and point cameras at ourselves for like our board meetings. That's not much different than we have here. So, I understand you guys did a ton of work. I appreciate it. I think it's a good plan. I'm just not sure that the timing is the right choice based on our student needs. And, you know, because there's offices in Longfellow, there's offices in Madison. They put on some paint, put up some duct tape, and, you know, go in there.
Yeah, part of it too is, you know, we're looking at about 12,000 square feet is what we need. And any of those buildings, it's overkill dependent, you know. And, you know, and it's all you know, it's all percentage based on how big each school is. But unless we were to demo part of that, you know, each of those schools, we still have to do, like, maintain all of the roofing. We still have to heat all of the building. So there's some of those costs where it's not as efficient as if we go into a building where it's more right sized, I guess.
Sure, no, and I appreciate that. What is that cost? So what does it cost to maintain the heat and the stuff at Longfellow? Or even just take a section of it, seal it off, put in a heater and an air conditioner in the one section, and then the other parts are turned down and done, so it's then minimal and we don't need to maintain the entire facility. We're just maintaining that section at the high rate for the district staff to be comfortable and safe and able to do the work that they need to do. Like, put up a door in the hallway, seal up some other doors, and, you know, spray some spray foam, and that'll keep up all the insulation and whatever, we're good. So, like, what is the cost of keeping a school going in order to do it? Is it less than 300,000 that we pay here? Because even then, we're still saving money by operating a school for district staff and paying for this.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I have the numbers of what it costs for electricity and all of that stuff for all of the buildings. Then I'd have to factor in, because it wouldn't be just that, then I'd have to factor in the CIP costs that would have to be done over the years too, to see if, you know, how it compared to that $300,000.
Right. And I'm not proposing that this is like a permanent solution for them. The district office, the district staff need a space to go. Don't deny that. But right now, with all of our needs, do we put that 7 million in for the district office staff? Or do we put that in for our students and our staff that are, you know, the ground troops for what's going on in our district?
Just a second, Brian.
Yeah, that's fine.
In case there's anyone else, who just because.
No, that's fine. I just, yeah.
Anyone else have any questions or comments they'd like to put in? Before I let Brian have the second chance.
Well, if we would use the Longfellow building, then we wouldn't be able to sell it. And so there's that. I guess I think that you guys have put 6 months of work into this, and you've thought a lot about it. And I think that fiscally, you're being as responsible as you possibly can. And I think that it's a good idea to move forward with it. I think you've thought of all of it. And I think we need spaces for admin, and I think this is probably going to be the cheapest. And I'm leaning towards supporting it.
You know, I think some of the thinking, so comment about Longfellow, I think that's kind of a bigger discussion, kind of what Dr. Luxman mentioned before about selling the building. So if we shift kind of more of the conversation towards Madison, you know, some of the, I guess, construction costs, when you start thinking about like beyond offices, is like our district enrollment center, right? So the only secured office in schools is the main office. So you come in, they buzz you in, you go into the office, they check in. So really, like, you'd have to reconstruct the entire office to have like a bathroom for people that come in to enroll their kids, and for a secured site and a reception office. So it isn't as, it's functionally, it isn't as just simple as just moving into a school. Here's the keys and the key fobs, and that's it. I mean, it's a little more than that. Now, to Brian's point, what is that cost? And to Brian's, that's a valid question, and I don't have the answer to it, but you know, and I think some of the costs when you see 7.8 million are things that you don't think of, like asbestos abatement, and what's that gonna look like at Madison, and all of our buildings are old. So you can imagine, like, from a general perspective, that's probably a problem in every building, right? So, certainly could get that for you guys. I wonder, my question, I guess, to the group is probably I think some of those discussions are, I guess the cost is likely just as high, but the second question is like, what is the long-term plan of Madison? Because you'd hate to put in, even if it's $1.5 million, just for us later to go, well, Madison's gonna be this, and I'm doing $1.5 million of renovation too. So I think the Madison question is a good question, but I think there's also a bigger question on Madison. What is the plan for it? Because if that isn't long-term, then spending a lot of money, $1.5 million or whatever it is, to do those upgrades, you have to undo them too. So you'd really have to think, I think long-term around what the plan is there too.
And that was part of the discussion that we had, internally, but also with the partners of, we've done things in the past where we purchased a property, we sold a property, we bought it back. We're looking at the same thing here, but the discussion I had with Dr. Lexman and then with Bray and CG Schmidt is that, are we looking at this as this is something that's temporary for 2 or 3 years? And then we'll try and save money and maybe we'll find a better spot and then we go renovate it? Or do we look at this as this is like our forever home? We're going to build it the way we need it. We're not building the Taj Mahal by any stretch. And then, then the question is, well, what if enrollment were to go up and, we need to, proportionally add more district staff? What do we do then if we just build what we have or use what we have and it's right sized right now? Well, there are spaces downstairs in the lower level of 9333 that are underused right now. So with some minor renovation, we could have probably 4 to 5 offices or more down there as well. So, that's kind of and it doesn't necessarily address the questions that you gentlemen had, and I understand that, but that's kind of the rationale and the lens that we were looking at when we looked at 9333.
Will the maintenance department lose any space?
They will not, IT will not. Nobody that's there currently that has space will lose any space. And they won't have to relocate while any of the construction or remodeling is going on either.
Thank you.
I think so.
Okay.
Unless
No.
Mr.
No, I'm totally joking. Sorry.
That's it. No. First of all, I do want to back up. I want to thank you for all the work that you put in. I know 6 months, it was a lot. We appreciate it. Here's kind of where my thought process is. I just would have liked to have seen other options and other data. And part of the reason is because of something that Brendan brought up. I can't talk anymore. It's getting late. It's all. Referendum. We just had a referendum that failed. We don't know whether or not we're going to have another one in the future. I think the odds would be in some way, shape, or form, there's going to have to be something because of all the needs that we have. So the fear I have is that whenever that is, they go back and say, well, you just spent $7.8 million on offices for your administration. Why didn't any of that go into your schools? Why didn't that help any of the needs that you have? So this could be the most cost-effective option. It could be. I don't know that we have enough data. At least I personally don't know that I have enough data to know that for sure. And I fear that is going to be a talking point in the future. So no matter what decision everybody makes, keep that in mind, because there's no way that's not going to be brought up in the future. And that's kind of where my frame of reference is coming. It could potentially cause more problems.
No, and I understand it, and the only distinction that I would make, and I know for a lot of people, it's all perception and reality doesn't, doesn't matter. But it is money that was set aside specifically for relocation of the district offices, and it doesn't adversely impact Fund 10 either.
But the argument would still be you had that money set aside. You could have shifted what you use that money for, and
Right.
you have needs. So
No, I
again,
understand.
I get your point completely. That's all I think.
Other questions or comments?
A little bit of it, anticipating some of this, a little concerned walking in with the kind of anticipating some of it. These are questions that make a lot of sense. So I've asked Aaron to reach out to, whoever we work through the lease space and at least start the conversation of, we want to extend it by 3 months, by 6 months, would they be open to that? And what would that cost? The other options we talked about is that, we split up administrative offices into available spaces. Not ideal, and the biggest challenge is really the enrollment center. Because you want it to be as centrally located as possible. On a bus line is critical. So Madison becomes less appealing for an enrollment center because you're gonna have to hike a couple blocks. So all those little things are kind of in the mix of all of this, but I think what I'm hearing is we should probably take a step back and at least do a little more due diligence on. The other one that hasn't come up is there's plenty of physical space at Central High School. There's plenty of square footage, right? But the board has committed to revisiting the high school consolidation at some point in the future, so why am I gonna spend? What do we like working with you guys, pay them more to do drawings at Central when.
Tech couldn't be there.
Right, tech can't go
We can't
there.
have tech
Tech has to,
Right.
can't be in a school building
Right.
or that's operating as a school. So, yeah, there's little nuances to this. But I think from the public side of it, to be able to say the Madison solution would, be 7 million, but we're still heating a whole building. So there's the carrying cost of that. Could it go into a piece of lane, right? But the other idea that Steve was hinting at is there some, probably opportunity to put some of lane back on the tax rolls. So that's another part of the longer range referendum strategy is we've returned some property to the tax rolls that benefits not only us, but everybody. It spreads out the taxes over a broader base. So putting, probably the original gym and that side of it, that's what the city said. There may be developers interested in that, given its proximity to, it's on Highway 100, close to Greenfield. So that might be a viable redevelopment, put it back on the tax rolls. Well, on district offices can't go there. So you start kind of whittling it down. But we can certainly go back and at least do the costing out at Madison. The vision we've been promoting around Madison is someday an innovation center. So a site that has higher end kind of labs and spaces for some of the more technical kind of courses and career prep that students really, that we want to be able to deliver for students, but to try to put it in one place and then also have it be a build space for the bigger projects that get messy, and so that teachers essentially can take their classes there for a week or two when they're doing bigger builds. So that's a little bit of why Madison wasn't maybe on the table as much as it should have been, at least for this conversation, to prep for it. So long story, short answer is, yeah, I think we probably need to do a little more homework and come back again, just so you could, because I want you all to have a sense of confidence in whatever direction it is. We feel pretty good about the direction we've recommended, but you have to, because ultimately you have to make a decision here.
So, Jeff, you go.
Well, I'm only one person with a half a mind and, the work that you guys put in, whether it was 6 months or 4 months, whatever. I know you're a business, so cha-ching, cha-ching, but these are 2 district employees there. I don't think they would encourage us to make a wrong decision after all the time they have spent putting into this. I'm not no background in construction or engineering or whatever, Steve, you do. I have to trust that you are bringing the best decision possible to the board. That's where I'm at. So I would be supportive of it.
I was just gonna say as far as the public's perception, because we know that they can always put one hell of a spin on things. We've heard it a million times. But I think a lot of, or a good portion of it might just come down to how it is conveyed to the public about how we explain it too, you know, and whether they choose to believe it or not, we can't control, but I do think that there's a lot to be said about that, just like the referendum, the first time it came through, you know, just people that I talked to, when they would ask me questions and I explained it differently, or maybe they just hadn't heard an explanation before, they were like, oh, if I would have known that, I would have voted differently. You know, so a lot of times I think it's just in how it's explained, or, you know, what the perception is. So I think if we just take the best control that we have of it too, as to why we are doing this and whatnot, hopefully that we can direct people's impressions as well. You know, because I agree with, you know, exactly what Jeff said too. I don't think you guys would steer us wrong. You have the same interests as what we do and such, you know, and obviously not leasing this place obviously would save us money every year. So it's not like we're just taking on more costs. We are saving some also. But so I think there's a lot to be said about that too. Is just making sure that we have a real strong argument as far as to put out there to people as far as why we're doing this and how we're doing it and that kind of thing too.
No, and I appreciate that. And I was gonna say, and that was one of the reasons why I had in there about the right sizing the district office as well, because any district I've been at here, California, whatever, everybody has a perception that we're sitting in an ivory tower. And then, you know, it's marble floors and marble countertops and all of that. And-
Right,
And so to show that we're going from, you know, we're gonna use half of the space.
right.
You know, it doesn't, you know, it doesn't address the issues that you gentlemen have. It doesn't address the issue of the hurt of losing a neighborhood school.
Right.
What it does show, I think that, you know, we're cognizant of that and we don't need to be as big either.
Right.
To be, you know, to function, and that we can be more efficient as well.
Yep, absolutely. Mhm.
Ms. Kaiser.
I just want to say, I completely validate your point of view of what you've been saying over here, which is awesome. What makes me feel better about voting in favor of this is that this is money that was earmarked for a specific goal already. If it was, hey, we got $8 million, what are we gonna do with it? A totally different story. But because this was earmarked for admin office, it makes me feel a little bit better that we're not taking money from the schools. It was already planned for something.
Mhm.
And this is, we have an opportunity to do it. And so that's,
Along that point, I did ask, what was the sale price of this building?
I had to pull it up.
Okay, because that was part of what is now earmarked for this other stuff, right?
Yeah, so from the sale from the building went into a specific fund that we
Yeah.
kept for the specific purpose of someday we're gonna have to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And we have these funds that to do that.
Which is important to
Yeah.
put that out there to
Yeah.
people, because that's something, it's those little pieces that the public doesn't hear, they don't always want to hear, but the more you can say that to them, I just personally think that's really important that they hear that, and because I think it will change minds, you know, as far as their thoughts and feelings on these changes when they hear that, oh, okay, that's from when that building sold and that's what they're using it for. Yeah, it didn't just pop out of nowhere and land in our lap and we're just gonna go on a spree.
totally
You
different
know,
conversation.
I think it makes a big difference.
And the other thing that, you know, and it is not gonna address all of the, like, the air conditioning issues or some of the other things, but one of the things that I'm working on too is that with the, and I think it was the IRA Act or something that President Biden signed.
Mhm.
There's a portion of that, it's like $880 million or something that's earmarked for public schools.
Mhm.
And so I'm working on an application for our district for that.
Oh.
Because that could be used for energy efficiency and like air conditioning and things like that. So, I mean, there's no guarantee we're gonna get it, but it never hurts to
Oh,
ask.
absolutely.
I, just to echo some of the thoughts from Steve as well, is I appreciate the vote of confidence. I feel like Steve and I, the team, in conjunction with Marty and Deidre and the directors, like, we have no interest in not steering the board in the best direction possible. We do feel like this is the best plan. With that said, we want every one of you to feel confident in that. So, I feel like, kind of to Marty's point earlier, like, we can do some of the analysis. I think the Madison discussion is a larger discussion around the board's intent around what that might look like, because you know, similar to public opinion is renovating a building just to undo the renovation. I mean, that would be a similar PR discussion that's kind of working too. So I think there's kind of a, it gets to be difficult on that side too. So.
And I do just want to make clear, I don't think in any way, shape or form you were steering us the wrong way. I'm just big on having data, and I'm trying to think big picture in terms of some of the problems that we could encompass down the road. So,
You just want to see all the worksheets.
yeah, basically.
And that's exactly why we have these workshops, is so that we can hear all of those points of view. And then that helps make the bigger picture and the final recommendation, I think, more palatable for more people. I mean, there's some that's not gonna like whatever we do.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
One tiny question. Do we have adequate parking at 9333?
Get his truck fit.
He doesn't have to go there. The
Yeah, we
boardroom's
need to
not
be
there.
somewhere else.
Yeah, we've looked at that as well. It's gonna be close, but yeah, we think that we would. But that's also one of the reasons why we're looking at, because, it doesn't include a boardroom. And there again, we could have made a bigger, and we talked about that at the committee meeting about making the addition bigger. But if you look at the portion of that new addition, here that's at the red and the pink area, that is not even half of the 3,000 square feet that we would need for a boardroom. So we'd have to more than double that area there.
And a lot of space to use a couple times a month.
Yeah, and so that's why we, internally, and then, talking, we didn't think that was the best use of renovation or new construction money, is to build a space where, at most any school, like I think somebody said, we could put cameras in a gym and point it at ourselves and go from there. I know that was said kind of in jest, but I mean, in all honesty, it really is true. There's a lot of spaces at a lot of our buildings that are going to be remaining where we could make a boardroom work.
I still like the idea of once a month, it's on the east side, once a month, it's on the west, and there are a lot of districts who do that, and it gives them a representation to other schools.
Right.
Yes, there's been discussions about that, and Dr. Lexman's going to speak with Shelley about seeing about even just temporarily moving our board meetings to the rec from Monday nights to the current rec center in their large room there, because they're set up with technology and everything. It's just a matter of they schedule a lot of things on Monday nights right now, and so we'd have to look at changing that for next year or the year after that, so that we would have a space moving forward. But I think none of us are fighting for board space, that we do think it's where we want to put current admin space. And for me, when I look at this, initially I'm like, man, $7.8 million, that is a lot of money. We could definitely take that and put that into one or two of our buildings and improve things there. But the other hand to that is that, imagine saying to the community, I want you to give me $7.8 million so I can build admin buildings. We know the last thing the community is going to support in a referendum is money for admin space, the very last thing. And we did earmark this money specifically for this purpose. And I think that yes, people will say, well, why didn't you put it here? Why didn't you put it there? When you earmarked it, you didn't know about the things that were needed in the district, and that's very true. But even if we took that money and put it into the schools, that doesn't fix all our problems. We're still going to a referendum, and we still got to figure out what's going to go with that. And I think that at the end of the day is where we have to look at it from. We have this money set aside from selling this building that we want to leave and save $350,000 per year, which can go directly back into educating students. And take that money to do what we need to do to make we have a permanent admin space. And that's the thing, like Madison, maybe that works out, but then I think the board has decided that Madison is the new admin building. That is offices moving forward, because it would make zero sense to renovate and then go back. I agree with Aaron 100% on that, because that's just throwing money out the window. What's the point of that? So if the board's like, yes, I think Madison is the place for admin buildings, then I do think there's a further discussion. I do think there's further work that should be done to look at what that would cost. But if we're just talking about a temporary solution, I'd rather see admin go into central, or see admin go into multiple buildings across the district and then get out of here and then figure out what that permanent solution is going to be if we don't want to spend the 7.8. But I think that the 7.8 might be 10, 3 years from now, you know, like even trying to look at other space we could rent that would be cheaper than this. I just don't see a good viable solution in the buildings that we have. Other than the renovation of 9333, because it is wide open. We don't have demo cost, right? Except for maybe some asbestos. It's already wide open. It's putting stuff back the way that we want it. So that's kind of where I fell. I was totally like, man, that's so much money. I think people are going to be upset. But when you look at the backstory of it, which I know not every board member is aware of, you know, we did specifically put that money away for this purpose because we knew that day was coming.
I also think a little bit about the superintendent search. A candidate is flown in from across the country and then we say, oh yeah, well, the building's gonna be, your admin offices is gonna be in an empty school building. I just kind of wonder about how many yeses we're gonna get, how many takers on the job. I wonder if that would lose us a good candidate.
Or they're spread across the
Yeah.
district.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think our enrollment center needs to represent what we want our district to be, and that is, that we're classy and we make sure that we represent and we have a space that is inviting for new families that come in. And the last thing that I just want to say is that I do not think we should take the time to look into Madison at all. Not for fiscal reasons, but because if we would choose to use Madison, we would not be able to create a space for the academics like we were planning on doing in the future, using that building for something bigger and better for kids. And we can't do that at 93. We have the wellness center there. It's not going to be for students at all. And we would not be able to create down the line what we were planning to use Madison for. If we look into putting the administration building there.
One thing, just for clarification, I don't mean to disagree with you, but there is the leadership and learning classroom that is at that would be at 9333.
Okay, yeah.
Because they can't be at I think somebody mentioned before, a functioning school. So there is that one classroom that's there, but otherwise you're right, there's no students there.
Right.
I think the
Thanks for
one thing I
clarifying.
think Marty had mentioned earlier, the enrollment center is having been in charge of that and worked through that for a number of years. To this day, the enrollment center's been here for nearly a decade and some families still don't know where it is.
Yeah.
And I'm just being very candid, like if the enrollment center is shifted multiple times, not that any problem can't be solved, but at a high peak enrollment and families don't know where it is. And they went here and it's not here. It's at a time where enrollment is as competitive as it is. It's just in my opinion, that's the one thing, and I would echo what Marty said, moving the enrollment center once is in the best interest of the community. Because having to move it is something we have to deal with. It has to move, can't stay here, but where it moves to, it should be something the board really considers, because there's a lot of factors that go into that and where it is and accessibility to that. Communication, we'll have to have a specific push about how we communicate the enrollment center, because families, it's not just you come in and enroll and you're done with that. I mean, families come here all the time, so.
And I know it was difficult to see from the picture that was up there, but off of the side of 9333, that's where the main entrance would be. And there's a receptionist area there. And then there's a restroom, and then there's the enrollment center. And we laid it out that way for just what you were talking about, is that, they come into the building. If you go to the right hand or the left hand side, you have that L&L classroom. If you go to the right, you have the reception, you have a restroom for people that are using the enrollment center, and then you have the enrollment center. And it's not, you don't have individuals walking through the entire district office then.
So one thing I would say, talking about the sale of this building and looking at that price point is, I think it would be a easier thing to digest if those numbers were closer together, the sale of the building and the cost to renovate 9333. So I know we have $600,000 that we might be able to reduce, put off to doing right away. I would like to see it reduced by another 300. So that we could say we sold the building for this much money and we're renovating this building for this much money. and they're as close together as we can get and still have what fulfills the needs that we have for district admin.
So I pulled
Yeah.
that up to your earlier question, that a few of you asked, so the sale of these two buildings, which we received $6.5 million.
6.5.
6.5, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And so, you know, if you, maybe Mark or Ryan can speak to this too, so. The green section, if you can go back, Steve, the green section of Steve's blueprint shows you kind of what is required for us to. If, let's say the board said, hey, in a month, we're okay to approve the green section to be just. That would be around 6 million, and that includes, I think, does that include all of the CIP, the 2.2?
Does, yeah.
So really, the green section. At 6 million, if you look at reducing 600,000, you're well under the 6 million mark, 5.5-ish. That would be, you know, we talked about that in our sessions too, around what if the board was open to, hey, let's get over there, the enrollment center gets in place. The red section, leadership and learning, we can, in talking with Deidre and her team, they could go into a school for a year or two, the board could revisit the addition at a later time, and in speaking with Mark and Ryan, that's something that if they know that ahead of time, that's gonna be a consideration. You know, it's like, I'm gonna redo my kitchen, but I'm leaving the wall behind it open because I have some plumbing work to do. That I'm gonna do that. You're thinking ahead, right? If you know what's gonna happen, you can plan for that. So if that's a consideration, it's something the board can consider too. Be much less cheaper,
Yeah.
well under the sale price.
That's just me. I mean, I don't know how the rest of the board feels on it,
Sure.
but again, looking at public perception, and I think the messaging about, we sold this building, we earmarked this money long ago for this purpose. This is how much money we got. This is how much money we're looking to spend. And it's not affecting taxes. It's not affecting students. It's not affecting staff. It's saving the district $350,000 per year in rent. That's me.
And anything we do to extend the lease kind of, gonna cost more per month than we're paying
Yep.
now. They're gonna, and especially if it's a short-term extension, they're gonna ask for a premium.
I reached out, as Dr. Lexman said, and the response was we were open to a discussion, happy to meet with you for the holidays. So it wasn't a yes, it wasn't, here's the price, I asked for the price, it was, we're open to meeting with you.
Okay.
So not sure what that means yet, but it sounds like we could do it, but it's likely at a premium, so.
Just quick comment, not, I'm done being mean. So what I really appreciate here and bringing these topics up and saying, do we really want this? Do we really need this? I think that has really shown both us vetting the pieces that we're looking at. It's shown that we're looking at it from different perspectives. We're looking at it, we wouldn't maybe have known that there's the earmarked funds that you're applying for. That could be something that we might be able to get to pull in money for us. I think that when we're doing these things, and especially when we're asking to approve something that's $7 million a week later from being presented and kind of going into the public ear, I think that's a tough piece to swallow. And so having this discussion, challenging or not, I think this is really good because it's showing everybody that we're not just here as part of like the rubber stamp or part of the educrat or whatever else is going on. We're here because we want to make sure we're making the best choice. We're getting the best options, which, you know, you guys give us great stuff every time you put it out there. And I like the plan. I just don't know about the cost. And I want to make sure about that with what we need. And so, you know, all of you, great discussion, and that this is something that somebody can go back to and be like, you didn't talk about that. And we did. We talked about it. This is what we have. So appreciate it. And thank you guys for all the work you're doing here.
You're welcome. And I'm sorry, one of the things I was gonna say too is that even, you know, this week today's Monday, but we talked about the ramp that's there. Is that, could we do that ramp differently? Because right now the ramp, the ADA ramp there, because it's on that incline, you know, it's about 300,000, a little more than 300,000. Is there a way that we could do that differently? Or could we use the, you know, we're already talking about putting an additional entrance on the front. Could we use that as, you know, the entrance, and because it's less of a slope there? So we've already talked about, you know, and I know it's maybe getting the cart before the horse, but just about, you know, maybe we save another 150,000 or something, you know, looking at things like that, where we're still meeting all the needs, but we're cutting the cost a little bit as well.
One more quick question.
Mhm.
So of the CIP costs, I know we said 600 or so might not necessarily need to be done. Of the rest of that, how much? When would the rest of that need to be done if we were not planning on moving the offices there? Because obviously it's stuff that needs to be done. So I guess how quickly outside of that would it need to be done? Would it need to be done? Because I think when you look at that too and say, hey, we had 6.5 million from the sale earmarked. I'm starting to, I'm starting to come around a little bit, but how soon would that have needed to be done anyway? Because that offsets some of that then.
To be perfectly honest, a lot of it probably wouldn't have to be.
Okay.
I mean, if that first floor area there that's unused, I mean, part of what we're doing is looking at putting more energy efficient
Yeah.
windows in there,
Okay.
more up-to-date windows. Well, if we're not using that space, it's fine the way it is. If we're not disturbing any of the piping or the flooring or anything, then we don't have to, remove the asbestos until such time that we do it. So, I know it's not necessarily the answer I'd like to give you.
No, that's, well, but again, those are things
But it's an
though.
honest answer, and we really wouldn't have to, should those things be done, like changing the railing on the stair to be ADA compliant. Yes.
And that's what's,
but-
that's what's interesting to this question, Steve's point is like 9333 in terms of the scope of the project is, I guess, small compared to a whole school renovation.
Oh, yeah.
And so like, when you look at 2.2 million, but then you look at really needed 1.4, a large portion of that is just compliance. You open something up, everything's got to be decoded.
Yeah.
So you go to, I'm thinking through what might happen if the Madison discussion, you open
Yeah,
up the
exactly.
office. Now you got, the plumbing's got to get all redone, the asbestos in the floor. Well, that floor is connected to this floor. Now that whole hallway's got, it's like, it's just a bigger space. So, the dominoes start to fall and
But then you get into the HVAC too, because, the HVAC is configured for where the offices are now. Well, if you start changing that, then do we have to add additional units? Do we have to run new duct work? Where that's kind of one of the nice things about 9333, that first floor, is because it really is a blank slate.
and some of that work was done when the wellness center was renovated to be the wellness center. So.
And I would just oppose all this against the $350,000 each year that we're saving. That too, by not renting, right? So yes, it's costing this much, but we're also almost subtract 350,000 from that, from the day we start using it, or more. I mean, I encourage you to find out what the cost would be outside the contract. That could be a good talking point. Well, it would cost us this much money to continue renting the space, or so how many, you can add it up. Well, it would cost $400,000. I don't know. Times how many years before we've actually paid off the renovation for a building that we now have.
I mean, if it's 6 million at 4, it'd be like 15 years.
So
And
There's
I
your
think the other
return
thing
on
too
investment.
that we realize is if we use that money that's earmarked for this, we understand that there's no bond associated with that. We didn't rent, we
Mhm.
didn't get a loan out anywhere, so there's no paying anything
No
back.
interest, no nothing.
I mean, we understand that, but I'm not, that's, to go, I think to your point is, that's, is something to tell the public as well, is that
Right.
this isn't costing the taxpayers anything additional by us doing this.
There has to be a narrative, right, that outlines all these costs, all the savings.
And
What's
there-
the scope of?
I agree. And there is some, I think, no, it's your question earlier about like, what if we could do it for under 6.5 or around that number, just.
It's close to that as we
It does,
can
it
get.
lines up. It's a nice way to look at it. And
It's a
I
PR
think
way.
there is some perspective, Dr. Lester talked about the wellness center being at the district fitness center, at the recreation where the lane side is, I mean, there's some thinking around that. So if we did do just the green section Steve showed and the board felt like that's a good number, let's proceed, gets out of the lease, gets us moving in the right direction, and you want to table that discussion. I mean, that's something, if we ever wanted to move the wellness center over, we could take our time, you wouldn't have a lapse in coverage for staff, which is a huge deal. And then, you could, if we're gonna do an addition there, whatever we want to do later, you could do it then, and then not have to have, some of these
I like
issues.
that plan because it also
So-
allows the lane piece to progress.
Yeah.
Which is gonna take a couple years to happen before we get to whatever rec is gonna be doing. And in doing that, we also find out what might happen with our piece of it, if it goes back to the tax rules or whatever. There's some things up in the air that aren't gonna be answered in a week.
Right.
When you want us to make this decision. So I think that look at the numbers, see what we can do for cost. Present with and without the addition, I think next week. And we can decide from there what we want to do. I'm hearing, and please nod your head or shake your head, if I don't think we need to look at Madison as the cost of trying to renovate that. In admins for between now and then, I don't think that is something that we need to look at this point. So don't worry about that. I think having some information, if you can get any, I know they said after the holidays. Any sort of numbers we can use in that presentation next week for what it would cost to continue staying here. We have the 2-year options. We know that's 350,000, right? That's at the current cost. But beyond that, even if we're just using projections from other things around us, maybe tap into our real estate attorneys to see if they'd be able to give us a ballpark of what it would be, free market, if you will, for staying in this space. Or something like it, someone's like, well, rent something else, find something that's cheaper, find the 12,000 square feet you need somewhere else and rent that at a lower cost, just so we can have all of our bases kind of covered. Joe?
I was just gonna say, I'd agree with not getting into a deep philosophical discussion on Madison, but I think there should be at least a line item in the next one to say, we're not gonna get into all the details on it, just based on this conversation tonight, that it would just putting that much in that temporary cost is just not worth it. I think that'd be, if we could include that, please.
The board, I don't think wants our admin offices to be at Madison.
Right.
And that's the only way that I'd be like, okay,
Well, it's
let's
okay.
look into it and
One
put the time and effort into doing that. Because why throw the money out the window? Just like I said, I'd rather, admin, I'm sure wouldn't like it, but just put offices in different buildings to figure out where we want to go. And then move on from there, but because I don't think Madison is the right space for that because of the enrollment center. Having something on the bus line, having something that's going to be front and center there, I think is important. And that's really easy to get to and close to a lot of things there in 9333. And then you wouldn't have to go in an elevator or anything, it's right there on the street. Okay, so this is a little bit of a roller coaster of a conversation, I think, for everyone.
Great.
But I do want to thank you for all the efforts that you guys put in. I know we didn't, talk to you very much, but obviously you were very integral in putting this together. Yeah, so thank you for that. I think that we're more okay with the plan that was presented, with the hopes that we can reduce some costs and we may not end up approving that addition to keep the costs down. I know we have enough money in the account, but not all of that came from this building. I think the apples to apples comparison will help a lot when telling this story. So not saying that we might not do that, but I think having those options in front of the board will be helpful. Is that?
Yeah, no, I think we get a sense of where you
I
want us to go
think
next.
too, pitching it with the split piece, because as even with it, what it is, the cost of the offices is only 5 million. The cost of the CIP is 2, and so keeping those pieces as a separate component. Like, we are in fact under what we sold this for to do the offices.
And that's kind of what I was trying to get.
Is in the CIP that we do have to do
Would it-
is because of code,
Right.
not because of choice.
Yeah.
Right. We're not just like,
Building a-
well, the
brand new
marble
map,
requires this much space,
Yeah.
and that's why we have to make the hallways wider.
And the last thing I'm gonna say, I will say a big selling point, I think, is going to be the fact that, hey, we're also not trying to get a big space for our board meetings. We're doing, like you said, literally what we need.
Yeah.
We're downsizing immensely, and this is what the cost is gonna be to do that. So,
So using the word right sizing in the presentation,
yeah.
size is good. We're right sizing the administration buildings, just like we're right sizing the district. And the board is gonna go
Wherever
Wherever.
existing space will allow.
rec a gym in the school. Hopefully not in the dead of summer, because I know those things are not air conditioned, but we'll figure that out later. You're gonna talk to Shelley about.
We did today.
You did, okay.
And
Just,
then I met with Shelley just to get her thinking about future board meetings and rec centers.
yes. Okay, so we're good?
Thank you.
Okay,
You're welcome. Thank you.
so
Thank you, guys. Second.
Wait,
We still have another part, don't we?
well, one second, one second.
Gotcha.
Yes. He is, but before we do that, because what Dr. Lexman had suggested was shifting this discussion of about the next piece to next week instead of doing it this week.
Oh, darn.
Yeah.
I see, I told you that was gonna be next.
Lengthy.
It's
Oh,
another
right.
lengthy discussion, so
Well, we
I
have-
would also advocate for that.
So this adjournment will
Send
be
me all presentations.
complete adjournment, okay?
I like
All right, so we have a motion
And I second.
and a second, all right, to adjourn. All those in favor? Opposed, we are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone. All right, so I first need a roll call vote to move back into open. So a motion and a second, and then a roll call vote.
Move to go back into open session.
Second.
And then can we have a roll call, Suzanne?
Mr. Burns.
Yes.
Mrs. Kaiser.
Yes.
Mr. Sickett.
Yes.
Ms. Deal.
Yes.
Mrs. Lee.
Yes.
Mr. Keller.
Yes.
Mr. Becker.
Yes.
Mrs. Carr. Yes. President Lee.
Yes. All right, so there is a bit of business that we need to make sure to do properly. And so we are going to table the discussion regarding the policy that we were going to move into a committee of a whole until next week due to our conversations this evening. So I'd look for a motion to do that.
I motion that we table discussion on policy 5722 until next week's board meeting.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes. We will look at that next week. And now I look for a new motion.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, we are adjourned again. Thank you, everyone.